The bells of Thornfell tolled in a slow, mournful peal that shook the stained-glass windows. Petals of deep crimson drifted from the rafters, caught on draughts of incense-laden air before settling over black-clad nobles and kneeling courtiers like fallen drops of blood. Marienne Thornevale stood at the center of the great hall, the weight of the Thorn Crown pressing down on her brow. Its wrought branches curled like frozen brambles, each thorn tipped with a shard of dark crystal. The metal hummed faintly, the way the air hummed before a storm. The Thornweave recognized her, accepted her, claimed her. She did not feel ready. "Rise, Queen of Thorns," intoned High Seer Corvellan, his voice echoing through the vaulted space. "The land has chosen, the weave has bound. Thornfell is yours to guard." Marianne drew in a breath scented with smoke, rose oil, and wax. The hall felt too vast, too bright. Dozens of eyes watched her, some awed, some calculating, some resentful. The nobles of Thornfell were like roses, beautiful, fragrant, and full of needles. Her fingers flexed at her sides. She wanted to clutch the skirts of her morning gown and run back to the quiet gardens where she used to read under the old ash tree. Instead, she lifted her chin. "For Thornfell," she said, voice steady, "and for all who call her home." A murmur spread through the hall. Captain Riona Ferndale, tall and broad-shouldered in the dark green of the Thorn Guard, stepped forward and drove the butt of her spear into the stone floor. The ringing note was taken up by the guards lining the walls. One by one, they saluted. It should have been reassuring. It only made Marianne more aware of how alone she was. At the edge of the dais, Lady Caroline Crestwyn watched with narrowed eyes. Her hair, once black as ink, was streaked with silver, but her gaze was as sharp as ever. Caroline had been tutor, chaperone, and strategist to Marianne since childhood. Now she inclined her head, just a fraction, as if to say, "You are doing well. Do not falter." Marianne held on to that small acknowledgment like a lifeline. The bells finally fell silent. Corvellan lowered his staff, its crystal tip still glowing faintly with the emerald light of the Thornweave. He spoke again, his tone shifting from ritual to proclamation. "In accordance with ancient law, the crown has passed. In accordance with the same law, a matter remains." His pale eyes fixed on Marianne. "The monarch's heart must be bound as the land is bound. Within 1 year, a consort must be chosen, that the Thornweave may rest in balance." A rustle broke through the hall, more like a hiss than a whisper. Marianne's spine stiffened. She had known this was coming, but knowing did not blunt the sting. "Yes," she said, "I am aware of the law." Lord Halvian Drosmere stepped forward from the cluster of nobles to the right. His dark hair was tied neatly at the nape of his neck, and his smile was the polite kind that never reached his eyes. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing, "no one expects such a heavy decision today. We stand united at your back. You may take the time." "Time," Caroline cut in smoothly, "is precisely what we lack, Lord Halvian. Valacross's riders were seen at our border before dawn. Their king has not sent condolences. He will send demands instead." The hall cooled several degrees. Marianne felt the Thornweave stir beneath her feet, like roots shifting in the deep earth. Valacross. The word tasted like iron. "We will address Valacross's intentions swiftly," Marianne said, "but we will not trample our own customs in haste. The law gives us a year." "A year in which the nobles may offer support," Halvian said. Another careful smile. Thornfell's houses each possess great strength, Majesty. A union with one of us might divide the rest, Saralan said. We have all seen how that ends. Marianne's mind flashed to the histories she'd studied. Cousins turned rivals, civil war fed by marriage alliances that favored one faction over another. The Thornweave had nearly torn itself apart once before, under a king who chose a consort to spite his enemies rather than unify his realm. I will choose with Thornfell's good foremost in mind, she said, but not today. Corvellan tapped his staff once. The crystal dimmed, signaling the ceremony's end. Servants moved to open the double doors at the far end of the hall, letting in a gust of cold air and the distant clamor of the city outside. As nobles began to disperse into smaller knots of whispers and planning, Saraline ascended the few steps to Marianne's side. You spoke clearly, Saraline murmured, low enough that only Marianne could hear. You did not faint. You did not cry. That alone will confound half this hall. Marianne tried to smile. My bar is impressively low. Saraline's lips twitched. You are queen now. The bar is whatever you say it is. Marianne pretended the weight on her head was not digging into her temples. The thorn crown seemed heavier when she doubted herself. The Thornweave, she whispered. Did you feel it when Corvellan sealed the rite? A tremor, Saraline admitted, but that is to be expected in the first hours of a reign. Marianne wasn't so sure. The magic that threaded through every root and stone of Thornfell had surged the moment the crown touched her hair. For a heartbeat, she'd felt every leaf outside the palace walls shiver, every stream bend around rock and reed. It had been terrifying and vast and lonely somehow. What if it rejects me? She asked. Saraline's hand brushed her elbow, a brief, grounding touch. The weave does not choose lightly. It has your blood and your vow. Now it requires your steadiness. And a consort, Marienne said dryly. That too. Saraline's gaze slid past her to some point beyond the dais. Marienne followed the look and saw Captain Riona standing near the side doors, speaking to a courier whose cloak bore foreign colors, Valacross red and silver, dulled by dust. Riona met Marianne's eyes. Even at this distance, the captain's expression was grim. Marianne's fatigue crystallized into a sharper, colder emotion. Duty. Whatever comes, she murmured, more to herself than to anyone else, we will face it. She stepped down from the dais, each movement deliberate, each breath measured, as if the Thornweave itself were listening. It was. The private council chamber always smelled faintly of cedar, ink, and old fire. Tapestries lined the walls, depicting past monarchs standing triumphant with the thorn crown shining. Tonight, the flames in the hearth cast those embroidered faces in restless gold, making them seem to move. Marianne sat at the head of the narrow table, the crown resting on a velvet cushion beside her rather than on her head. It still seemed to hum, the way a wasp nest hums. Captain Riona stood at attention, helm tucked under one arm, ash-brown hair braided tight against her skull. Saraline occupied the place to Marianne's right, fingers steepled. High Seer Corvellan sat a little apart, his staff resting against his shoulder like another limb. Across the table, Lord Halvian leaned back in his chair as though this were a casual evening meal instead of a war council. Report, Marianne said. Riona didn't waste words. Valacross sent a single rider under flag of truce. He delivered a sealed letter from King Alvar Brast. No escort, no additional demands. She placed a folded parchment on the table. The red wax seal bore Valacross's snarling wolf sigil. Bold to send one messenger alone, Halvian said. Or arrogant, Saraline added softly. Marianne broke the seal. The message was short and written in an unfussy hand. To the new Queen of Thorns, she read aloud. Valacross acknowledges your accession. We expect assurance that the instability of Thornfell's magic will pose no threat to our lands. Until such time as you bind your heart in accordance with your own laws and secure the Thornweave, we must assume your kingdom is vulnerable. We will act as necessary to protect our borders. King Alvar Brast. So gracious, Saraline said dryly. He almost sounds concerned for our well-being. Marienne folded the letter carefully. He sees weakness. The Thornweave has not yet settled, and word has spread that I've not chosen a consort. He believes that if we are unstable, he may justify a preemptive strike. Or, Halvian said, he hopes to frighten you into a hasty alliance that benefits Valacross more than Thornfell. He will not get one, Marienne said.
We will not bind our crown to a foreign throne. Riona bowed her head in agreement. We have strengthened the northern watchtowers. The Thorn Guard is ready if Valacross so much as breathes in our direction. Marienne believed her. The guard had been her father's pride, and Riona had drilled them with tireless rigor. But steel alone would not be enough if the Thornweave turned against them, if the land withered under her uncertain hand. The seer? Marienne asked. You felt the weave's response today? Corvellan's eyes, pale and almost colorless, seemed to look through her. It is like a river whose banks have shifted. The water knows where it must go, but not yet how. You are its new channel. It presses against you. You must learn how to let it flow without drowning. That is encouraging, Marienne said faintly. The weave is drawn to oaths, Majesty, to vows freely given, to bonds forged in truth. The more divided your court, the more frayed its edges. The law of the consort was not made for appearances alone. It was meant to anchor the monarch's heart. Anchor it to whom? Marienne asked. To a man I barely know, chosen by convenience? To a noble whose greatest talent is calculating advantage? Halvian's smile tightened, but he said nothing. The weave doesn't care for convenience, Corvellan said. It favors sincerity, loyalty. It will not be fooled by pageantry. Yet our enemies will gladly be fooled by appearances, Saraline interjected. Majesty, forgive plain speech, but Valacross and half this court will measure you by what they see, not what the weave feels. You need a consort who serves both truth and illusion. And where, precisely, do I find such a marvel? Marienne asked. In the market square? Riona cleared her throat. Possibly in the dungeons. The room fell quiet. Marienne stared at her. Explain. We took prisoners in the skirmish 3 days ago north of Briarhold, Riona said. Most were common soldiers. One was not. He bore the insignia of Valacross's royal vanguard, a knight of high station. His name is Sir Aldric Vaelborn. Halvian's brows rose. A Vaelborn? So the rumors were true. King Alvar sent his favorite dog to sniff at our doors. Aldric is no dog, Riona said, a hint of heat entering her voice. He fights like a man who expects to die for something. Marienne folded her hands on the table to hide the sudden chill in them. Why was I not told of this prisoner sooner? You had not yet taken the crown, Saraline said. We chose not to burden you before the right. There will always be a reason to wait, Marienne said. If I keep stepping aside to catch my breath, I will never stand. She looked to Riona again. This night, what is his condition? Unbroken, Riona said. He suffered injuries when his horse went down, but our healers have treated him. He refuses to speak of Valacross's plans. He has asked only one thing, that his men be treated honorably. Honor. The word lodged somewhere between Marianne's ribs. And you think I should see him, she said. I think Valacross has shown us its measure, Saraline replied, answering in Riona's stead. They send veiled threats under the guise of concern, and they send their finest knight to our border. If you wish to understand King Alvar's mind, perhaps you should speak with the blade he intended to use. Under guard, Halvian said quickly, and not alone. Of course not, Riona said. Marienne felt the Thornweave stir again,
a subtle pull toward a choice she had not yet consciously considered. A consort who served truth and illusion, Corvellan had said, a bond formed under the most unlikely of circumstances. Ridiculous, she thought, dangerous, and yet. Well, she murmured, mostly to herself, if I must stare at the jaws of the wolf, I would rather do it now than wait for it to come through the door. She rose. The others followed suit. "Captain," Marienne said, "take me to this Aldric Vaelborn." The palace dungeons were not the dripping, fetid warrens of lurid tales. They were carved from smooth stone, lit by mage lamps that burned with steady green light, and kept scrupulously clean. Marianne's father had insisted that Thornfell's justice be firm, not cruel. Even so, the air down here felt close. The sounds of the castle above were muffled to a distant thrum, like a heartbeat heard underwater. 2 thorn guards straightened as Riona approached, their spears in hand. "Majesty," one said, bowing, "the prisoner is secure." Marienne tugged her cloak tighter around her shoulders. "Open his cell." "Your Majesty," Riona began quietly, "we can bring him to an upper chamber if you prefer. There's no need for you to—" "No," Marienne said. "I would see him as he is, and he should see me as I am, not elevated on a dais with a crowd at my back." Riona hesitated, then nodded. She gave a sharp gesture, and one of the guards stepped forward to unlock the iron door. As it creaked inward, Marianne stepped past Riona and into the cell. Sir Aldric Vaelborn sat on the narrow stone bench, back to the wall. He was taller than she expected, his shoulders broad even in borrowed Thornfell linen. His dark hair fell to his jaw, slightly tangled, framing a face more angular than handsome, with a straight nose and a mouth set in lines of grim patience. A faint bruise shadowed his left cheekbone, another touched his jaw. His hands were shackled loosely in front of him, not enough to let him forget what he was, enough to allow him to eat and drink without humiliation. He looked up as she entered. Their gazes met. His eyes startled her most.
Not flint-hard, not blazing, but watchful, like a man who had stood in storms and counted each lightning strike. "Your Majesty," he said, before she or anyone else could speak. His voice was low, carrying the clipped cadence of Valacross's accent. Marianne glanced at Riona and the guards. "Leave us." Riona stiffened. "Majesty, I must protest." "You may stand outside the door," Marianne said, tone calm but final. "If he so much as breathes wrong, you may come in spear first. But this conversation is between him and me." A muscle jumped in Riona's jaw, but she bowed. "As you command." The guards stepped back. The door swung almost closed, stopping short of the jamb. Marianne could see the shadow of Riona just beyond. She turned back to Aldric. He had risen to his feet, albeit a bit slowly, as if testing how far his injuries had healed. He inclined his head. Even shackled, he bowed with a warrior's dignity. "I did not expect the Queen of Thorns to come to my cell," he said. "We were told you had not yet decided whether to hang us or ransom us." "That decision remains," Marianne said. "For now, your men are fed and treated. Their fate rests with mine." "That is more than some would grant enemies," he said. "You were not captured during a festival," she replied. "You crossed our border with steel in your hand. What did you expect would happen?" "A clean death," he said simply. "Nothing more." Marianne studied him. He spoke without drama, without pleading, as if he had measured his life long ago and found it expendable. "I am told you are a knight favored by King Alvar," she said. "That is not the kind of man usually sent to harry a border outpost." He gave a small shrug. "King Alvar favors those who do as they are told." "And what were you told to do?" "To test Thornfell's defenses," he said without pause. Then, after a heartbeat, "and to carry back what I learned." So he would not admit to more, not yet.
"You need not fear that I will torture you for secrets," Marianne said. "I have little taste for screaming." "You do not strike me as squeamish," Aldric replied. That answered more than it seemed to. He had been watching her, listening. "You have been in Thornfell for 3 days," she said. "What have you learned so far?" He blinked once, surprised by the question. "That your walls are thick, your guards disciplined, and your healers skilled enough to set a dislocated shoulder before it stiffens." He flexed his right arm slightly. "That you do not starve your prisoners, that your people speak of the Thornweave as if it were a living creature." "It is," she said quietly. His gaze flicked to her, sharp. "Is it? You do not believe in magic, Sir Aldric?" "I believe in steel," he said, "and in men who wield it."
Magic. He shook his head just enough to dislodge a strand of hair from his eyes. "In Valacross, we prefer things we can see and touch. Your Thornweave is a story we tell our children when the crops fail." "Stories can wound as deeply as steel," Marienne said, "or heal more gently." He watched her for a heartbeat too long. She could not tell whether he meant to scoff and was restraining himself, or whether he genuinely did not know what to say. "Why did you come to my border?" she asked softly. "Do not give me the answer your king would want. Give me your own." For the first time, something flickered in his expression, an echo of weariness, perhaps, or doubt. "Because when Valacross's fields wither, we look outward," he said at last. "Your Thornweave is blamed for much. You know this. We have lost men to storms that form too quickly, to rivers that rise too fast. The priests say your magic twists the wind to favor Thornfell. King Alvar believes you use it as a weapon." "And do you believe that?" she asked. "I believed what I was told," he said, "until I saw your men fight like they expected to die defending land that cracks under their own boots." Marienne swallowed the sharp knot in her throat. The drought had been worst in the northern provinces. She had seen the parched fields herself, had watched farmers look to the sky as if expecting it to apologize. "The Thornweave is weak," she admitted. "It falters because my father is dead, and I have not yet learned how to bear it. But it does not reach across borders to strangle your harvest. Magic does not care for lines drawn on a map." "That is not what the priests say," Aldric replied. "Priests of Valacross or Thornfell?" His mouth quirked, a fraction. "You already know the answer." She did. And she knew something else. Valacross's fear was not wholly baseless. When Thornfell's magic surged or faltered, the land itself reacted. Storms, droughts, strange tides in the rivers. The effects could spill over into neighboring lands. But intent and consequence were not the same thing. "How long have you served Valacross?" she asked. "Since I could lift a training blade," he said. "My father died at the border. My mother wove funerary cloth until her hands failed, all for coins the crown paid too late." "And yet you ride at that crown's command," Marienne said. "Loyalty is rarely convenient," he said, "nor uncomplicated." The words resonated in her chest more than she cared to admit. The thorn crown on the cushion beside her, though not touching her skin, thrummed faintly. The weave was listening. "You know our law," she said, changing the angle of the conversation. "Perhaps you were told it as a child's tale, that the monarch must bind their heart to another within a year." "I heard it," Aldric said. "Though in our version, the king binds his heart to a thorn and bleeds himself dry for power." His gaze flicked to her left hand, bare of rings. "You have not chosen." "No," she said, "I have not." "And your nobles circle," he said, "each imagining themselves a suitable thorn." "There is no shortage of volunteers," she said wryly, "each convinced that binding themselves to me is a sacrifice the realm should bow to." "Then I suppose I should thank them," he said. "Their hunger gives me time to breathe before the rope is chosen." She tilted her head. "You think you will hang?" "I crossed your border with steel in hand," he said again.
It would not be unjust. The law allows for ransom, she said. Do you truly wish Valacross to have its favored knight returned so quickly? He asked. That would be generous. He had said earlier he believed in steel and men who wielded it. He understood strategy, and he was not begging, not angling for mercy. A dangerous thought rose, uncoiling in her mind like a vine seeking something to cling to. Corvellan's voice echoed in her memory. You need a consort who serves both truth and illusion. An enemy knight, visible to all, bound to her side. To Valacross the message would be sharp. Their own blade turned, their oath-bound warrior sworn to her. To her own nobles, it would be proof that she did not cower before foreign threats, nor dance to the tune of any house at court. To the Thornweave. She did not know. That uncertainty terrified her. You speak as if your future is something already spent, Marienne said. A man who rides to another kingdom's border at his king's order does not expect to die in a featherbed, Aldric replied. And what if, she asked slowly, your king's orders changed? If your oath no longer bound you as narrowly as it did? His eyes sharpened. What are you asking, Majesty? She held his gaze. This choice, once spoken aloud, could not be easily taken back. The Thornweave stirred under her skin, threads of power tasting the shape of her decision. In one stroke, she said quietly, I can deny Valacross the return of its knight, and deny my own nobles the satisfaction of seeing one of them crowned at my side. In one stroke, I can turn a threat into a symbol. Understanding flickered across his face. Shock followed, so naked he could not mask it in time. You would not, he said. Your people would never accept. My people will accept what keeps their sons and daughters from dying on a battlefield, she said, or they will learn to. You think them so proud they would rather spill blood than endure a jolt to their expectations? He stared at her as if seeing someone entirely different than the reluctant girl who had walked into his cell. You would make an enemy your consort? He said.
It would not be the first time a queen married a risk, she replied, voice steady. You came to Thornfell with the intent to test our strength. Now you will test something else. He drew in a long, slow breath. The chains between his wrists clinked faintly. This would not be a true union, he said. Your nobles will say it is a sham. Valacross will say you have collared their knight, and you, something like anger, or perhaps bewilderment, flickered in his eyes. You know nothing of me. On the contrary, she said, I know one important thing. You do as you are told by a king who does not care whether you live or die. If you accept my terms, you will do as you are told by a queen whose survival is bound to the land beneath your feet. That seems an improvement. He almost laughed. The sound escaped as a disbelieving exhale. And what are your terms? He asked. You will stand beside me as consort, she said. You will speak truth to me, even when it is bitter. You will not raise steel against Thornfell or its people. Your first loyalty will be to this kingdom. If you cannot grant that, then I will hang you with the honor you crave, and send your bones back to Valacross with due ceremony. A muscle in his throat shifted as he swallowed. And what do you offer in return? He asked. Beyond my life, which you already hold. The chance to shape something, instead of only breaking it, she said. The chance to see for yourself what the Thornweave is and is not. Your men will live, under parole, until such time as peace or prisoner exchange can be arranged.
"You will not be a hostage, Sir Aldric. You will be seen by all as the man I chose." The words felt precarious on her tongue, yet as she spoke them, the Thornweave murmured through her veins, neither rejecting nor fully embracing the idea, waiting. Aldric looked down at his shackled hands. For a moment she thought she saw his composure crack, not into despair, but into something like bleak humor. "A consort," he said quietly, "for the queen of the very land I was sent to test." "Do not pretend you never imagined stranger fates," she said. He lifted his head again. Those watchful eyes met hers. "Majesty," he said slowly, "if I accept, Valacross will call me traitor. My name will be spat in temples where my father's is carved into stone." "And if you refuse?" she asked. "Then I die with honor," he said, "and you are left to choose a consort from among the men who circle you with smiles and knives." He studied her in silence, as if weighing her on some internal scale. She held herself still beneath that scrutiny, though her heartbeat seemed loud in her ears. At last he straightened as much as his injuries and chains allowed. "Very well," he said. "I will not die for King Alvar's pride. If I must bind my life to a crown, let it be to the one that came into my cell and offered me a choice instead of a decree." Her breath left her in a slow, controlled exhale. "You accept." "I accept," he said, "on one condition." "What condition could you possibly think to demand?" she asked, more curious than offended. "Do not ask me to kneel to you in falsehood," he said quietly. "If I am to stand at your side, it must be as a man who speaks what he believes, not a mouth that repeats what you wish to hear. I will not praise the Thornweave's every whim, or call peace where there is none. If you want a figure to adorn your dais, choose one of your own nobles. They will flatter you better." Her lips parted. She had expected conditions about his men, about letters home, about the terms of his captivity dressed up as privilege. Not this. "If you lie to me," she said, "the Thornweave will know. It was bound to me this morning, and already it has shown a taste for honesty. I do not want a tongue of honey. I want a shield that does not crack at the first blow." "Then we understand one another," he said. Outside the half-closed door, Marienne heard a faint exclamation, the muffled sound of Riona's suppressed oath, no doubt, on realizing where this was heading. "You will be brought from this cell to a guest chamber," Marienne said. "Your chains will be removed, though guards will remain posted outside your door. Tomorrow the court will assemble. Thornfell will see the man I have chosen. They will not like it. I suspect I will not be the most popular guest at your next feast," Aldric said. "Feasts can be endured," she replied. "War cannot always be undone." She turned toward the door, then paused. The crown on its cushion throbbed faintly at the edge of her awareness. She half expected the Thornweave to lash out, to send a jolt through her skull in protest of this audacious choice. Instead, she felt a curious stillness, as if the land itself were holding its breath. She looked back at him. "Sir Aldric," she said, "when you are brought before the court, you will be offered the chance to refuse publicly, should you change your mind overnight. I will not hold you to a bargain made in a dungeon's shadow." He studied her for a long moment. "If I wake tomorrow and find this was a fever dream, Majesty," he said, "then perhaps it will be kinder to hang me after all. I suspect facing your nobles will be the harsher ordeal." Unexpected laughter rose in her chest. It came out softer than she felt it, a small, startled sound in the stillness. "On that," she said, "we may agree." She stepped from the cell. The moment she crossed the threshold, the Thornweave surged in her veins like sap rising through a tree, startling her into a sharp inhalation.
Riona was at her side instantly, eyes wide. "Majesty," the captain said. "What did he say? What have you decided?" Marianne looked down the corridor, lit by steady green mage lamps. The path ahead felt like walking into thorns, painful, inevitable, and perhaps the only way through. "I have decided," she said, "to give Valacross and our own nobles a union they will never forget." Saraline's brow furrowed, but there was the faintest glint in her eyes. Corvellan, who had come silently down the last stretch of stairs, watched her with that unreadable calm. "The Thornweave is restless," he murmured. "It senses a knot forming." "Then let it knot," Marianne said. "We will see whether it breaks or holds." She reached for the Thorn Crown on the velvet cushion the guard carried behind her. The metal was cool and humming, a circle of elegant, merciless briars. She set it back upon her head, the thorns curving without piercing her skin. For now. "Summon the council for morning court," she said. "Inform them that their queen has chosen a consort." Riona inhaled sharply. Halvian's name was already on her tongue, Marianne could see it. "From where?" Riona managed. "Which house?" Marianne looked back toward the half-closed cell door, where a man from a foreign land stood shackled, having just agreed to bind his life to hers. "From Valacross," she said, "our enemy." Shock rippled through the corridor like a gust of cold wind. "And may every thorn in this crown bear witness," she added quietly, "that I am not afraid to hold a blade by the edge if it keeps my people from the point." The Thornweave stirred, not in rebellion, but in something that felt almost like grim approval. Far above them in the palace gardens, the bare rosebushes trembled in the night air. Tiny buds, impatient and out of season, swelled against their green sheaths, as if testing whether winter truly still held dominion. By morning, the first rumor would spread through Thornfell. Their new queen had taken an enemy knight as the man who would stand at her side. The kingdom would shudder. And the slow, dangerous work of turning a political ploy into something more, something truer, would begin. The morning sun filtered through veils of mist that clung to the palace's eastern courtyards. Dew beaded on every blade of grass, trembling as if the land itself had not yet recovered from the shock Marianne had delivered the night before. Word traveled quickly in Thornfell, riding the air like spores on the wind. By dawn, the rumor was no longer rumor. The Queen of Thorns had chosen an enemy knight for her consort. Marianne stood at her chamber window, watching the mist burn away in pale gold. The thorn crown lay on her vanity, its thorns catching the light like droplets of fire. She touched her temples, feeling the faint echo of the Thornweave humming through her veins. It had not kept her awake, but it had not let her rest deeply either. Every time she hovered at the edge of sleep, it stirred, like a creature pacing behind the bars of her ribcage. A soft knock sounded. "Enter," Marianne called. Lady Saraline stepped inside, carrying a cup of steaming herb tea. Her expression belonged to a woman who had slept even less than Marianne. "How many riots have begun?" Marianne asked before Saraline could speak. "Mercifully, none," Saraline said, offering the cup. "But the nobles are gathering like crows on a fence. They intend to pick at this decision until either you justify it or they find a way to uproot it." Marianne sipped the tea. Warmth spread through her chest. "I will justify nothing to them. The thorn crown rests on my head, not theirs." "That will not stop them from testing how secure it is," Saraline murmured. Marianne set the cup aside. "Aldric will be brought to the hall soon. He should not face them looking like a half-starved prisoner." "Has he been bathed, clothed, and unshackled?" Saraline said. "Captain Riona saw to it herself." "Good," Marianne exhaled. "And his men?"
In the north wing under guard, fed, monitored, and not one of them foolish enough to try escape. Riona says Aldric's quiet influence has settled them. They trust him to return with instructions. Marienne blinked. Already? Loyalty can be unreasonably swift, Caroline said, and sometimes unreasonably stubborn. She paused. Is yours to him yet either? Marienne couldn't answer, not honestly. She had made a shrewd, necessary choice. A political strike as sharp as any blade, meant to force obedience from her court and hesitation from Vaelacross. But something in Aldric's steady gaze, the way he had accepted her decision without begging or bravado, unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. She turned away from the window. I will not lie to the weave. It already presses harder than I can bear. It wants truth. And you intend to find the truth in a man who was sent to test our defenses? Caroline said, not unkindly. In a man who looked at me as though he expected to die, and still spoke plainly, Marienne corrected. I trust that more than the honeyed words of Thornfell's peacocks. Caroline's lips thinned, but she bowed slightly. As you say, Majesty. The great hall shimmered with nervous energy. Nobles filled the space like restless birds, feathers ruffled, eyes bright with gossip and indignation. The Thornweave pulsed faintly beneath Marianne's feet, sensitive to every emotion in the room. When she stepped onto the dais, silence stretched like taut string. Your queen has made a choice, Riona declared, stepping forward. Stand and witness. Murmurs rose, sharp and crackling, but they quelled as the side doors opened. Aldric entered, flanked by 2 guards. No chains, no ragged clothing.
He wore a simple dark tunic trimmed in Thornfell green, his hair still damp from the bath. His injuries had not been hidden, but neither were they emphasized. He walked with the quiet, grounded steps of a soldier assessing a battlefield. Marienne watched him approach, noting the subtle shift in the hall. Surprise, anger, curiosity, more fear than she expected. The nobles saw a threat they could not easily categorize, a potential blade at her throat or theirs. Aldric stopped at the foot of the dais. He bowed, not deeply, but with deliberate respect. Your Majesty, he said. Her breath caught. His voice carried clearly, steady, unstrained. Yesterday's shadows were still there, doubt, weariness, the weight of what he'd agreed to, but something else layered beneath them, resolve. Sir Aldric Vaelborn, Marienne said, projecting her voice, prisoner of Thornfell, knight of Vaelacross, and the man I have chosen as my consort. A tangible gasp rippled through the hall. Aldric stood still, neither shrinking from the reaction nor stiffening against it. Marienne descended 1 step on the dais, so she no longer towered above him. Yesterday, in the presence of witnesses, you agreed to my proposal, she said. Before this court, you may speak again. Does your acceptance stand? It was his chance to walk away, to save himself from exile, political ruin, and the disdain of 2 kingdoms. He met her gaze. It stands, he said. The Thornweave throbbed in Marienne's blood, a pulse like a heartbeat. The hall erupted in overlapping voices. This is madness! He is the enemy! Thornfell's laws! She cannot mean to! Silence, Caroline commanded, voice sharp as snapped ice. But one voice rose above the others, oily and bold. You bind yourself to a viper, Majesty. Lord Halvian stepped forward, his smile tight and perfectly measured. This man is sworn to Vaelacross, Halvian said. His loyalty is to a king who seeks our ruin. You would gift our most sacred position to a traitor? Aldric's jaw tightened, but he did not speak. Marienne did. I chose a man who knows war and wishes to end it, she said. A man who has no faction in this court. A man who cannot be bribed by promises of power or land because he came here to die for his king's pride. You call that virtue? Halvian scoffed. I call it clarity,
Marienne said, "a trait my nobles seem to lack." A murmur spread, sharper this time, half anger, half reluctant respect. Halvian's eyes flashed. "Even if his loyalty shifts," Halvian said, gesturing toward Aldric, "Valacross will call this an act of theft." "Then they may take it as a reminder that Thornfell does not cower," Marienne replied. "We defend what is ours, and we choose our own destiny." The Thornweave responded with a faint tremor. Leaves on the high rafters rustled, though no breeze passed.
Halvian bowed stiffly, but his eyes burned. "As you will, Majesty," he said, "but do not be shocked when he sinks his thorns into your throat." Marienne ignored him, turning instead to Aldric. "A consort of Thornfell stands at the Queen's side," she said. "Walk with me." He hesitated only a moment before stepping up the dais. Gasps rippled again. His movement was fluid, almost graceful despite lingering injuries. When he reached her side, they stood only a breath apart. He did not look at her hands, did not assume he had the right to take one. She appreciated that more than she expected. "This court will adjust," she said quietly. "They look ready to riot," he murmured back. "Then we will begin their education." His lips twitched, the ghost of humor. "As you command." Later, after the hall had emptied in a storm of whispers, Marienne led Aldric along a balcony that overlooked the gardens. Winter roses were trying to bloom despite the season. The Thornweave's tremors had made the plants restless, the buds straining against the cold. "This is not how I imagined this morning," Aldric said. "No one imagines their life turning on a queen's whim," Marienne replied, "and yet here we are." He walked beside her, examining the gardens rather than the guards discreetly stationed nearby. "Your people stare at me like I am a wolf who wandered into their nursery," he said. "You are," she said lightly, "and yet you put me at your side. I prefer a wolf I can see." That drew a quiet exhale, almost a laugh. He stopped near the balustrade, looking over the frost-silvered hedges. "You risk a great deal trusting me." "I am trusting my judgment," she said. "You are simply the test. And if your judgment is flawed, then the land will make it known." He turned to face her. "The Thornweave responds to emotion," you said, "to truth." "It does. What does it feel now?" Marienne hesitated. The Thornweave pulsed beneath her skin, neither warm nor cold, expectant. "It feels like a step taken onto uncertain ground," she said, "and yet the earth holds." He absorbed that quietly. "I cannot promise what you want," Aldric said at last. "I cannot swear that my heart will bend quickly to Thornfell, or that Valacross will forgive what I have done." "I do not ask for quick," Marienne replied, "only honest." His gaze softened, just slightly. "That I can give." A breeze brushed past them, carrying the faint scent of thawing soil. A nearby rosebud quivered, its petals unfurling a fraction more. Marienne exhaled, feeling the Thornweave settle, still tense, but settling. "You will be instructed in our customs," she said, "and you will train with Captain Riona."
The people must see that you serve Thornfell now. If that is what is required, I will do it. It is. A quiet moment stretched between them, fragile but real. Aldric bowed his head slightly. "I will not embarrass you before your court." She found her voice softer when she answered. "I did not choose you to shield my pride." "Then why?" he asked. "Because you told me the truth in a cell where you had nothing to gain," she said. "And because you looked at your death with clear eyes. And that makes me fit to stand beside a queen?" "No," she said, "but it makes you fit to begin." His breath caught. She could hear it, faint but there. She stepped back. "Come, there is much to do before the council meets again." As they walked from the balcony, the Thornweave pulsed once, an acknowledgement, a warning, or perhaps the first faint sign of acceptance. Marienne could not tell which. Beside her, Aldric walked with measured steps, a foreign knight thrust into a role no man had held before. He did not reach for her, did not try to match her stride or impose his own, but he stayed at her side. And though she would never admit it aloud, some small part of her felt less alone for it. Snow came late to Thornfell that year. For weeks the sky had hung low and heavy, the air metallic with the promise of frost. Yet each morning Marienne rose to find only a dusting of white on the palace roofs, while the fields beyond the walls remained stubbornly bare. The farmers whispered that the seasons were confused, that the Thornweave did not know whether to sleep or wake. In the council chamber, maps lay strewn across the long table, Thornfell's borders inked in deep green, Valcrosses in red. Lines of ink described rivers, hills, watchtowers, and fields that had seen more skirmishes than harvests. Valcross will not cross in force, Lord Halvian said, fingertips resting on the border. Not yet. They prefer to test, to provoke, to prod our weakest points. Marienne tracked the path of his hand. It lingered near the northern marches, where the soil had cracked in the drought. Then we will show them no weakness, she said. Captain Riona, the winter patrols? Strengthened, Riona replied. We rotate fresh squads to the border every fortnight. No gap larger than an hour between patrols, even in storms. And the weave? Marienne asked, glancing at High Seer Corvellan. The Thornweave responds to your resolve, Corvellan said quietly, but it is uneasy. It wants you grounded, Majesty, anchored. Marienne heard the unspoken word, consort. Aldric stood near the far end of the table, his arms folded lightly across his chest. He wore Thornfell colors now without visible discomfort, though his belt still bore the understated design of Valcross's wolf, allowed as a concession to his past.
He studied the map with a soldier's eye, not a courtier's. Their scouts favor the Birch Hollow Ridge, he said. Here, the snow lies shallow, but the ground is treacherous. Good for ambush, poor for retreat. Helvian's eyes flicked to him. And you know this from personal experience, Sir Aldric? Aldric did not flinch. I do. I bled there long before Thornfell ever laid a hand on me. King Alvar tests every path he expects to send men along. He sends you to spill your blood so he may read the ground, Saraline murmured. How charming. It is efficient, Aldric said, without bitterness. For him. Marienne studied his profile as he spoke, how he kept his tone level, offering information without apology or resentment. Some days she could almost forget he had once ridden into her lands with the expectation of never returning. Almost. We will double the watch at Birch Hollow, she said. No movement across that ridge goes unseen. Halvian inclined his head, but his jaw was tight. As you wish, Majesty. When the council dispersed at last, the maps were left like a half-played game. Marienne stayed behind, tracing a finger along the inked nines. Thornfell looked smaller from above, its struggles reduced to dark borders and tiny symbols. It was easy to imagine some distant king seeing only shapes on parchment, not people. You press hard enough on that border, and the ink might fight back, Aldric said quietly. She hadn't heard him remain behind. Now he stood at her shoulder, hands clasped loosely behind him. It already fights, she said, only not where we can see it. You doubt yourself? It was not a question. I doubt many things, she replied, myself least of all. He huffed a faint breath. That sounds like arrogance. It is survival. She looked up at him. Do you never doubt yourself, Sir Aldric? When I had the luxury, he said. A man under orders has little room for doubt. You raise your shield when you are told. You ride where you are pointed. If you start to question the shape of every command, you die, or someone beside you does. And yet you questioned, she said. For a moment, the only sound in the chamber was the crackle of the hearth. The day I rode into your lands, he said, slowly, I thought I knew exactly what I was doing. The lines were clear. Valacross here, Thornfell there. Enemy, ally. Simple. Then I saw your people fight with empty fields at their backs and cracked wells at their sides. It did not feel like raiding a threat. It felt like pushing a drowning man further into the river. And now, she asked. Now the lines are less clear, he said, but I am still told where to stand. She raised a brow. By whom? He met her gaze. By you. The Thornweave stirred between her ribs, an echo of something that might have been wry amusement.
I do not recall ordering you to question your king, she said. No, he replied. You offered me a chance to stop obeying him. There was no accusation in his voice, only quiet recognition. Somehow that unsettled her more than if he'd spoken with anger. You resent my offer then, she said. If I did, I would have refused, he said simply. I said before, I would rather bind my life to a crown that looks me in the eye. King Alvar never did. He looked at maps. His gaze dropped briefly to the parchment between them. Still, he added, there are days I wake and do not recognize the man who agreed to your terms. Marienne watched his hands. They flexed once behind his back, as if he were resisting the urge to reach for something, his sword, perhaps, or something less tangible. And do you regret him? She asked. He considered that, then shook his head. I regret the time I wasted before I became him. The honesty of that answer struck her like a small, quiet blow. The Thornweave responded with a faint warmth, as if it approved. We are both new to our roles, she said softly. Perhaps we might waste less time together than we did apart. He looked at her then, fully, without the careful distance he usually maintained. For a heartbeat, the council chamber was very still. Perhaps, he said. Corvellan's warning from earlier that week whispered at the back of her mind. The weave favors sincerity. It will not be fooled by pageantry. If she let herself lean into moments like this, the magic would bind them more tightly than any ceremony. And if he betrayed her? She stepped back from the table, breaking the invisible thread between them. Corvellan prepares a ritual, she said briskly, to strengthen the connection between myself and the Thornweave. You are to attend. His brows rose. What use is my presence in a magic ritual? I wield no such power. The weave reacts to those near me, she said, to their intentions. It is suspicious. It refuses to settle fully while half my council imagines ways to unseat me. Having my declared consort present may reassure it. Or irritate it, he said. Possibly. Her lips quirked. Think of it as testing new armor. If it pinches, we refit it. He gave a faint bow. As you command. The ritual chamber lay deep within the palace, beneath the roots of the oldest rosebush in the gardens. Vines threaded through the stone walls, pale green tendrils lit from within by a subtle glow no lantern could imitate. The air was cool and damp, carrying the scent of earth after rain. Marienne stood within a circle of etched thorns on the floor, the thorn crown heavy on her head. Corvellan moved around the perimeter, murmuring phrases in the old tongue. Captain Riona waited near the doorway, arms folded, her spear resting within easy reach.
Aldric stood just beyond the circle, at the edge of the light. He wore no armor, only a dark tunic and leather bracers, the garb of a man expecting to move quickly if something went wrong. "Remember," Corvellan said, voice calm, "the weave will mirror your heart. If you force it, it will resist. If you open too quickly, it may flood you. Balance and intention, Majesty." Marienne nodded. Her hands were steady at her sides,
though the Thornweave already pricked at her like 1,000 tiny needles beneath the skin. "What must he do?" she asked, tilting her head toward Aldric. "Stand," Corvellan said simply. "Observe. Want you to live." Aldric's jaw tightened. "I can manage that." "Then we begin." The seer planted his staff in a notch carved into the floor. The crystal at its tip flared with emerald light. The vine-wrapped walls shivered, leaves rustling though no breeze blew. A faint hum rose, low at first, then gathering strength. Marienne closed her eyes. She had done this once before, under her father's guidance, when the Thornweave was no more than a distant presence. Then it had been like dipping her hands into a river from a safe rock. Now the river surged. In an instant she was standing in fields she had never walked, feeling the ache of dry soil under the sun. She was in the roots of trees, slow and deep, hearing the distant movement of creatures above. She was the cold edge of a stream against stone, the push of wind through bare branches, the tremor of a hillside that remembered battles long past. The Thornweave poured through her, around her, testing. It tugged at her fear, tasting it. It pressed against the edges of her doubts, probing for cracks. "You," it seemed to whisper without words. "You." Marienne steadied her breathing. "I am here," she murmured. "I do not flee." Through the swelling roar of sensation, she felt a point of stillness, like a stone in the river. Aldric, standing just beyond the circle, his presence a weight the Thornweave flowed around and over. It probed at him, too. For a heartbeat, she saw him as the weave did, a man shaped by oaths not its own, steel strong but scarred. His intention toward her a tangle of duty, caution, and a new, startling thread of protectiveness. The magic tasted that protectiveness, and, to Marienne's shock, leaned into it. The river's force doubled, slamming against her inner walls. She gasped, knees buckling. "Majesty!" Riona's voice, distant and sharp. The thorn crown bit into her scalp. The room tilted. She felt herself falling, the world narrowing to the sickening drop in her stomach and the roar of green light. Then strong hands caught her. Her palms pressed against solid warmth, Aldric's chest. The Thornweave surged at the contact, throwing off sparks that danced along her arms. For an instant, she was aware of his heartbeat racing under her fingers, the rough fabric beneath her touch, the way his arms locked around her, not as a prisoner, but as a man determined not to let her hit the ground. "Breathe," he said, voice low and close, cutting through the roar. She dragged in a breath. It tore like cold air in winter, but it filled her lungs. The Thornweave rioted. It did not know what to make of this. The enemy knight holding its chosen conduit with such fierce focus. It pressed against the moment, testing whether this contact was threat or shelter. Marienne made a choice. She did not pull away. She let herself lean into the support, just enough to show the weave the shape of it, not submission, not dependence, a brace offered in a storm. Slowly, the green glare softened. The vines along the walls ceased their frantic twitching and settled into a low, steady pulse. Corvellan's chanting faded, the hum ebbed. When the last echo of magic quieted, Marienne found herself still in Aldric's arms. He hadn't moved. "Release her," Riona said tightly, her spear point suddenly much closer than before. Aldric loosened his hold at once, stepping back with his hands visible, palms open. Only his eyes betrayed what had just happened, the lingering adrenaline, the fright he would never admit to aloud. Marienne straightened, refusing Riona's attempt to steady her. "I am unhurt," she said. "Majesty," Riona protested, "you fell." "I did not fall," Marienne said. "I was caught." Her gaze met Aldric's. For a heartbeat, neither looked away. "What happened?" she asked Corvellan, finally dragging her attention from him. The seer studied the circle, the faint scorch marks where the Thorn Crown's glow had touched the air. "The weave tested the bond," he said quietly. "It pushed at you to see whether the man you brought into its chamber would hold or break." "And?" Aldric asked softly. "And you held," Corvellan said. He sounded as if he himself were not sure how he felt about that. Marienne looked down at her hands. The skin along her wrists tingled where she had clutched Aldric's tunic. The Thornweave's hum had shifted subtly, from raw, restless energy to something more focused, more aware. "It responded to him," she said, half in wonder, half in alarm. "He has no magic." "It does not respond to magic alone," Corvellan said. "It responds to intent, to vow, to the shape of a heart that is braced towards you rather than away." Riona's expression shifted, a crack running through her distrust. "So, the land itself approves of this arrangement," she muttered. "The land," Corvellan said, "approves of a man who chose to hold rather than watch the queen strike stone. Do not confuse the two." Marienne forced her breathing to slow. "Aldric," she said.
"Yes, Majesty. You may leave us." His brows rose. "Is that wise? You can barely stand." She lifted her chin. "I can stand perfectly well. Go." For a moment he seemed poised to argue. Then he inclined his head and obeyed, stepping out of the chamber and leaving only the fading echo of his presence in the Thornweave. When he was gone, the magic settled further, like ripples smoothing on a pond. Riona exhaled. "I will never say that I trust him," she said, "but I am glad he was there." "So am I," Marianne admitted. Saraline's words from days before came back to her. You need a consort who serves both truth and illusion. The truth was this. When she had stumbled, Aldric had moved without hesitation. There had been no calculation, no pause to measure what he might gain or lose. He had simply caught her. The fallout came swiftly. By evening, half the court had heard some version of what had occurred in the ritual chamber. The details shifted with every telling. In one version, Aldric had dragged the queen from the circle, breaking the magic. In another, he had been the cause of the weave's rage, his foreign presence poisoning the rite. Lord Halvian let each tale spread, his own comments always perfectly measured. "It is concerning," he said, mildly, over cups of spiced wine, "to invite such a disruption into our oldest practice. We risk much binding the Queen's life to a man we barely know," he murmured in corridors. "Of course, I support Her Majesty, but surely we must consider contingency plans should this experiment fail." His words were never openly treasonous, only practical, only reasonable. Marienne heard them all, carried back to her like leaves caught on currents. In her solar that night, she stared into the fire until the lines between flame and memory blurred. Her body still remembered the rush of the weave, the electric contact of Aldric's touch. He had knocked on her door precisely once that day after the ritual, only to send a message via Riona. "I await your summons if you need me." He had not assumed. She appreciated that more than any apology he might have offered. "Asleep?" a familiar voice asked from the doorway. Marianne looked up. Saraline stood there, half in shadow. "No," Marianne said, "thinking. That is often more exhausting." Saraline crossed the room with the comfortable authority of someone who had known her since she was small. "The weave's reaction has unsettled you." "It reached for him," Marianne said bluntly, "not as a threat, as if it recognized something." "Loyalty," Saraline said. "It recognized loyalty." "He is an enemy knight," Marianne said.
3 weeks ago he would have gladly ridden through these doors if his king had told him to. And 3 weeks ago, Saraline said, you were not queen. The older woman settled into the chair opposite her. Your father made his share of unexpected choices. Some nearly tore this kingdom apart. Others saved it.
Risk is not new to the Thorn Crown. I am not my father, Marienne said. I know, Caroline replied. That is why I am still here. That drew a faint smile. Caroline's eyes softened. You care more than you wish to about what this man becomes, she said. That is not a weakness, child. It is only dangerous if you refuse to name it. Marianne's fingers tightened on the arm of her chair. I do not. You do, Caroline said gently. You look for him in every council session. You watch how he stands when others speak. You are not blind to him. Marianne stared into the fire. The flames licked the logs with slow patience. I do not know what to make of him, she admitted. He carries Valacross in every scar, but he does not speak of his king with reverence. He questions without disrespect. He moved to catch me without thinking. That last part frightens me more than any of it. Because you did not expect to be thankful for it? Because I did, Marianne corrected. Because some part of me reached for him in that moment, and the weave saw it. Ah, Caroline murmured. They sat in silence for a few heartbeats. Whatever grows between you and Sir Aldric, said finally, remember this. Your heart is not only yours. The land feeds on it. It will push at your bonds, test them, strain them. If they are weak, they will snap. If they are strong, they will hold. Hiding your feelings from yourself will not hide them from the weave. Marianne's throat tightened. So I must choose between lying to myself or to the land? You must choose to lie to neither, Caroline said. That is the difficult path, and the only one that will not break you. The border attack came 3 nights later. Marianne woke to Riona's urgent knock. Majesty, the captain called through the door. A rider from Birch Hollow. You must come. The ride to the war room blurred. Marianne threw a cloak over her nightgown, the thorn crown left behind in her chambers. Aldric arrived from the opposite corridor at the same time, boots half-laced, tunic hastily donned. Riona met them at the threshold, face grim. Birch Hollow watchtower was struck, she said. A Valacross raiding band. Not a full force, but enough to test our defenses. 3 gods dead, 2 wounded. The rest held the line. Marianne's stomach clenched. How close did they come to crossing the river? Not close, Riona said. They fell back the moment our reinforcements arrived. A test, Aldric said. His jaw was tight. They wanted to see how quickly we respond, how well the Thornweave reacts. The weave did not stir, Corvellan said quietly from his post by the map wall. Not as it should have. The land is slow to answer, uncertain. Marianne pressed her palms flat on the table to steady herself. Images rose unbidden, men bleeding into snowless dirt, the river running dark. Valcross will think us weak, she said. Or will think you distracted, Halvian murmured. He had arrived ahead of them, dressed imperiously even at this hour. A queen divided between ruling and training an enemy knight in courtly manners. Aldric's shoulders stiffened, but he did not rise to the bait. What matters now is not why they attacked, but how we respond, Riona said sharply. I can ride at first light with reinforcements, secure the ridge, show them Thornfell's teeth. Do it, Marianne said. Leave enough guard here to keep the palace secure, but let Valcross see we do not recoil. Riona nodded, already half-turned to leave. Aldric spoke before she could. I should go with them, he said. The room went still. Marianne straightened. Absolutely not. He met her gaze evenly. I know their tactics, their signals, the patterns they favor when retreating. I can warn Riona before she rides into a second ambush. And you can ride straight into their arms, Halvian said. Your king would welcome his stray hound. Aldric's eyes flashed. If I had wished to rejoin Valcross, I had opportunity enough when I first came to your border. I did not.
And yet, Halvian said, the temptation must be strong. A raiding party, your own countrymen. Enough, Marienne said. The word cracked like a whip. She looked at Aldric. The Thornweave thrummed faintly, as if waiting. You would risk facing your former comrades, she said. Your king's colors. Yes, he said simply. If I am to claim Thornfell as my post now, then I will not hide behind walls while others bleed in its name. Let them see me on the other side of the river. Let them know I chose this. Choose me, something in her thought, unbidden. She shut that away. Corvellan watched her. Saraline's face was unreadable. You are my consort, Marienne said slowly. If Valcross sees you at the front, they will know where to strike. They already know, Aldric said. It changes nothing, except that this way I can strike back. The idea of him on that ridge, a target for arrows that might otherwise never find him, made her stomach twist. The Thornweave picked up that fear, amplifying it until her vision blurred. She forced herself to breathe. You will not lead the shadows, she said at last. Riona commands. You ride at her side. If you disobey her orders, we will all know where your loyalty lies. Aldric bowed.
Understood. Riona's gaze flicked between them, then she nodded once. I will watch him. I know, Marienne said. When they were gone, Riona to gather her riders, Aldric to arm himself properly, Marienne stood alone with Corvellan and Saraline in the half-lit war room. You are afraid, Corvellan said quietly. Of course I am, she answered. If Valacross kills him, I lose the shield I raised between their king and my throne. If he defects, I lose the last shreds of trust some of my people have in me. And if he returns, Saraline asked, having stood on our side of the river and chosen not to cross back. Marienne swallowed. Then we will know something about him neither Thornfell nor Valacross believes possible. The Weave is listening, Corvellan warned. It always is, she said. She turned to the map, tracing a path from Thornfell's capital to Birch Hollow with her finger. Hold, she whispered to the land itself. Hold them, and do not let my fear unmake you. The Thornweave pulsed beneath her touch, not in answer, but in acknowledgement. The hours that followed stretched like wire. Marienne went through the motions of the day, audiences with petitioners, brief meetings with merchants, a quiet moment in the chapel where she stared at the carved history of her family and felt very small beneath it. All the while, part of her mind remained fixed on an unseen ridge of land to the north, where steel and decisions would clash. By midday, a messenger hawk arrived, its leg bearing a scrap of parchment marked with Thornfell's seal. Riona's handwriting was brisk and cramped. Skirmish contained, enemies scattered. Casualties on our side, 2 wounded, no dead. Valacross left their own behind. We held the ridge. Aldric fought for Thornfell. Marienne read the note 3 times. The words did not change, but something in her chest unknotted with each repetition. He fought for Thornfell. She found herself in the gardens without consciously deciding to go there. The winter roses, confused by the Thornweave's fluctuations, had begun to bloom in pale, frost-touched blush and deep crimson. Petals fell onto the snow like drops of thawed fire. She touched one, watching the delicate skin of it bruise under her thumb. You are supposed to be sleeping, she told the plant mildly. Stubborn thing. So are you, a voice said behind her. She turned. Aldric stood under the arch of an old willow, cloak dusted with pale road dirt, a faint smear of dried blood on his cheek. His hair was wind-tossed, his posture weary, but he was standing. Riona trailed a few steps behind him, watching like a hawk. She nodded once to Marienne. A soldier's report conveyed without words. He did as he said. He did not run. You're back, Marienne said, and immediately wished she sounded less relieved.
I did say I would be, he replied. She stepped closer, studying him. You're injured.
"Not badly," he said. "This is not my blood." He brushed at the stain on his cheek, revealing more dirt than wound. "Still dramatic," she murmured. "I'm out of practice at returning from battles," he said dryly. "You will have to forgive me for the theatrics." Riona cleared her throat. "With your leave, Majesty, I will see to the wounded." "Go," Marianne said, "and thank you." Riona's mouth softened. "He earned his place on that ridge," she said, nodding toward Aldric, "whatever else he is." Then she left them alone among the confused roses. For a moment, neither spoke. The Thornweave hummed softly under Marianne's feet, tasting the air between them. "How was it?" she asked finally. "Cold," he said. "Loud. Familiar. And standing on our side of the river." He was quiet for a heartbeat. "Less familiar," he admitted, "but right." The word caught at her. Right. He looked past her at the roses, a faint line between his brows. "When Valacross riders saw me, they hesitated," he said. "Some called my name. Some cursed it. One shouted that I had broken my father's memory." Her chest tightened. "I'm sorry." "I am not," he said, surprising her. "I have ridden under a banner for so long, I forgot what it feels like to stand where I choose. Today, I chose. I did not run to them. I stood where I said I would." The simplicity of that declaration, the quiet pride threaded through it, moved her more than any elaborate oath could have. "The men with you," she asked, "how did they respond?" "They watched," he said. "Thornfell soldiers are not generous with trust, nor should they be. But when an arrow came, one turned his shield toward me, as well as his queen's banner. That is something." The Thornweave warmed, as if satisfied. Marianne realized her hand had curled into the fabric of her cloak, fingers aching with the force of her restraint. She forced them to relax. "I read Riona's note," she said. "2 wounded, no dead. A rare blessing," he said. "Would you have written if it had been worse?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "You deserve the truth, even when it cuts." She stepped closer without meaning to. They were near enough now that she could see each smudge of dirt across his knuckles, the faint tremor of fatigue in his shoulders. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for standing where you said you would, for returning." "Where else would I go?" he asked, as if the question were genuinely puzzling. "Home," she said, "to Valacross." He held her gaze. "I am home." The words struck her as hard as any blow, and as gently as a hand reaching out in the dark. The Thornweave surged, reacting to the shape of those words in his heart. Green light shimmered faintly at the edges of the garden, where no one else would notice but her. She drew in a sharp breath. "You must be exhausted," she said, voice a little too brisk. "You should rest." "So should you," he replied. "Queens don't rest," she said. "Knights don't either," he answered. "And yet here we both stand, rather worse for wear. Perhaps we are allowed to be something else occasionally." "What would that be?" she asked. "Tired," he said, "and glad to be alive." Her lips twitched. "Very well. For the space of 10 breaths, we may be tired and glad to be alive." He nodded solemnly. "I accept the terms." They stood together in silence, the winter roses nodding gently around them. 10 breaths, shared without words. 10 breaths in which Marianne let herself feel the simple relief of his existence, the weight of the choice he had made at the river. When the 10th breath left her, she straightened. "Now," she said, "we return to being queen and consort. Then allow me to return to my chambers before Riona drags me there by the ear," he said. "She has opinions about how long wounded men should linger in the cold." "She is often right," Marianne replied. He bowed slightly. "Majesty." He turned to go, then paused, looking back. If the Thornweave responds strangely to what I did today, if it pushes at you or makes you unsteady again, will you tell me?" "Why?" she asked. "Because I would like to know whether I am a help or a hindrance," he said. "I would like to be the former." She swallowed. "I will tell you," she said. He nodded once, satisfied, and left. Marianne remained among the roses, the thorn crown absent from her head, but the weave very much present in her veins. It pulsed in time with her heartbeat, warmed by relief, sharpened by the thin thread of something she did not yet dare to name. Lord Halvian watched Aldric's return from the shadow of a balcony. The knight's posture was weary, but unbowed. The Thornfell soldiers gave him a wide berth, but did not refuse his presence among them. Riona walked beside him, not behind. Halvian's lips curled into a thoughtful smile. He stepped back into the dim corridor, where a handful of nobles waited, faces pale with apprehension. "Well," one whispered, "did he run to his people?" Halvian shook his head. "No, no. He ran toward our queen's favor instead." "That's worse," another muttered. "If she comes to rely on him—" "She already does," Halvian said softly. "The Thornweave revealed that well enough in the ritual." "What do we do?" the first noble asked, voice pitched high. "We cannot challenge her openly. The people—" "The people," Halvian said, "will follow whoever keeps their bellies full and their children alive."
If the Thornweave continues to falter, they will not care whether it is a queen or a council that claims to fix it. They will cling to whoever makes the earth bear fruit. "You speak of council," the second noble said slowly, "not of a single ruler." "Thornfell has been ruled by one head and one heart for too long," Halvian replied. "Perhaps it is time for a hedge of wise voices instead, a ring of thorns, if you will, rather than a single crown." "And the queen?" the first noble whispered. Halvian's smile did not reach his eyes. "She may keep her crown," he said. "It will simply rest lighter on her head once it is no longer the sole point upon which this kingdom turns." "And the knight?" the second pressed. "He is unpredictable." "A tool," Halvian said, "one we may yet use." He watched Aldric disappear into the palace with Riona. "A man torn between two oaths is easily pushed," Halvian murmured. "We need only find the right place to press." He turned toward the stairway leading to the upper halls. "Send word to Valacross," he instructed quietly, discreetly. "Tell them their lost knight stands at the queen's side and whispers in her ear. If they wish him back, or if they wish him dead, they will respond. Either way, we will know where the pieces lie." The conspirators exchanged uneasy looks, but fear of the future outweighed fear of involving their enemy. "As you wish, my lord," one said. Halvian smoothed his sleeves, his expression serene. "The queen thinks she is reshaping the game," he said. "Let her. While she is busy teaching an enemy knight to walk her halls, we will make sure there are no floors left beneath them." That night, Marianne dreamed of rivers. In her sleep, the Thornweave pulled her along a winding course, showing her flashes of land she barely recognized. A field of frost-tipped reeds, a hill crowned with ancient stones, the Birch Hollow ridge where blood had soaked into stubborn soil. At each place, she felt the imprint of men's choices. At Birch Hollow, she felt something new, a place where a single decision had shifted the weight of invisible scales. Aldric, standing on Thornfell's side of the river, Riona's shield angled toward him, a Valacross archer lowering his bow in disbelief. The wave lingered there, tasting the shape of that choice. Then it pulled her further, deeper.
past the ridge, across the border, into Valacross lands where the magic thinned but did not vanish entirely. It seeped under stones, brushed against the edges of foreign roots, listening. A tower rose in the distance, crowned with the wolf banner. Within its walls, a man sat at a table strewn with maps. Marienne felt no warmth when the wave brushed his presence, only cold. King Alvar bent over his ink and strategies, unaware that Thornfell's magic listened at the edges of his world.
He held a letter in his hand, its seal broken, Lord Halvian's discreet missive. Marienne tried to see the words, but the magic would not let her. It kept the content blurred, only the shape of consequences clear. Anger tightening Alvar's mouth, calculation sharpening his gaze, a hand striking the table. The weave recoiled from him, sliding back across the border like water retreating from a poisoned shore. Marienne jolted awake in her bed, the thorn crown on its stand glowing faintly in the dark. Her heart pounded. The Thornweave hummed with warning. Someone has tugged at the lines, it whispered at the back of her mind. Someone within. She rose, wrapping a robe around herself, and crossed to the window. Outside, the garden slept under a thin veil of frost. The roses had at last stopped trying to bloom. "There will be more storms," she murmured to the night, "but we stood through this one. We will stand through those as well." The weave responded with a faint, resolute pulse. Below, in the lower courtyard, she saw a lone figure moving along the wall. Aldric, restless, walking the perimeter like a man who had not yet learned how to sleep in safety. She watched him for a long moment, hand resting against the cold stone. "I will stand," she said quietly, more to herself than to the magic, "and I will not stand alone." The Thornweave hummed in agreement. Far beyond Thornfell's borders, Valacross's king began to rearrange his plans, and Lord Halvian's quiet rebellion took root in whispered corners. The lines on the map were shifting, even if the ink did not. And in the heart of Thornfell, between a queen and her enemy-turned consort, something delicate and dangerous continued to grow, no longer just a political knot, but the first fragile strands of trust, tested by steel and storm. Snow fell at last. Silent, unhurried flakes drifted down from a sky the color of tempered steel, settling over Thornfell in a thin, deceptive calm. The palace roofs softened under white, the courtyards muted, the gardens hushed, as if the entire kingdom held its breath. Marienne stood at her balcony rail, one hand wrapped around the cold stone, the thorn crown's thorns biting lightly at her scalp. The Thornweave pulsed beneath her skin, uneasy, watching, listening. It had not been truly still since the ritual, since Aldric had caught her, and the magic had tasted the shape of his intent. Below, soldiers moved through the courtyard in thick cloaks. Riona directed them briskly. Aldric stood beside her, tracing the tracks left by the messenger hawk that had arrived at dawn. A hawk bearing Valacross's seal. Marienne's stomach had dropped when she saw the crimson thread tied to its leg. The message was short, written in King Alvar's own hand. "You have taken what is mine. Return Sir Aldric Vaelborn at once. He has betrayed our kingdom, and his treason stains your throne. Deliver him by the next full moon, or we will reclaim him by force. No pretense, no diplomacy. A threat, naked and cold." Marienne had not yet shown Aldric the message. She wasn't certain whether doing so would steady him or break him. A knock sounded. "Majesty?" Saraline's voice. "It is time." Marienne turned from the window. "Send Aldric to me." Saraline hesitated. "Are you certain? Riona says tensions in the barracks are high. Some soldiers resent riding beside him. Some nobles have been whispering." "I know what they whisper," Marienne said tiredly. "Send him."
Saraline bowed and withdrew. When Aldric entered, he looked colder than the snow outside. His hair still damp from the morning wind, his tunic dusted with flakes, his posture braced. "You sent for me," he said quietly. Marienne motioned him closer. "There's news from Valacross." "Then the hawk was theirs," he said. She held out the parchment. Aldric took it without hesitation and without touching her fingers. He broke the seal, eyes scanning the page quickly. His jaw tightened. A single muscle ticked near his temple. "So," he said at last, voice flat, "it seems I am useful enough to want back, or dead enough to demand." Marienne watched him carefully. "What does this letter mean to you?" A long pause. "It means King Alvar thinks he still owns me," Aldred said. "He believes a man's loyalty can be summoned like a dog with a whistle." "And can it?" she asked softly. "Does this call stir anything in you?" His head snapped up. For the first time in days, a flash of heat entered his expression. Not anger at her, but something older, wounded. "Majesty," he said slowly, "I walked into my homeland's arrows for Thornfell. I stood on your ridge. I bled for your soil. I am not a man who forgets what he chooses." She let out a quiet breath she hadn't known she was holding. "Then you understand," she said, "that this letter forces my hand. If Valacross intends to reclaim you, they will not stop at words." "They will not take me," Aldric said. "And if they try, they will also come for me," Marienne finished. "You are not the only prize, Aldric." The Thornweave stirred sharply, echoing her fear. Aldric took a slow step closer, not touching her, but near enough that she could feel the quiet intensity in him. "I will not let them harm you." "You cannot fight an entire kingdom," she whispered. "Then I will fight the part that comes through your door." The Thornweave warmed, startling her. It liked that answer far too much. She turned away before it anchored her heart in something she wasn't ready to acknowledge. "Lord Halvavian has been watching you closely," she said. "More closely than any other." Aldric nodded. "His men glare at me often enough."
"And I've caught two, whispering to Valacross scouts near the wall." Marienne's head snapped around. "Why did you not report that?" "I did," he said, "to Riona. She said she would investigate." Marienne grimaced. "She should have come to me." "She wanted to verify before alarming you," Aldric said, "and she knew how this court already doubts me. Some doubts are inconvenient, others are dangerous." Aldric's gaze sharpened. "You think Halvian is dangerous." "I know he is," she said. "He masks his intentions well, too well. And now, with this letter—" "You fear he will push the court to hand me over?" Aldric said. "I fear," she said quietly, "that he will use this to fracture Thornfell, to prove I have chosen poorly, to unseat me if the weave falters again." Silence stretched. "What do you want me to do?" Aldric asked. Marienne opened her mouth, but before she could speak, the Thornweave convulsed. A jolt shot through her chest, so sudden she staggered. Aldric reached forward instinctively, but this time he stopped short, hands hovering inches from her arms. "Majesty?" His voice was strained. "What is it?" She gasped as the thorn crown pulsed like a struck drum. Pain lanced through her skull, sharp and bright. The weave spiraled around her in wild, tangled threads, trying to show her something. A place, a sound, voices. She pressed a hand to her temple. "Something is wrong. There's someone." A flash of images slammed through her. A darkened storage hall beneath the palace. Nobles whispering in a circle. Halvian's voice. "Tonight, while the queen sleeps." A blade glinting green with poison. A sigil drawn on the floor, siphoning thornweed energy. Marienne gasped and grabbed Aldric's sleeve before she could think better of it. "They mean to kill me," she whispered. His eyes went cold and sharp in an instant. "Halvian?" "Yes, and others. They're gathering beneath the east wing." Aldric didn't hesitate.
We need Riona, now. No, Marienne said. If we alert too many guards, the conspirators will scatter and strike later from hiding. We must catch them now, before they finish whatever ritual they've begun. Then we go together, Aldric said. You will not face them alone. She shook her head. No, it is too dangerous. They know the palace better than you. They will trap us. They will not trap me. Aldric's voice turned hard. And they will not touch you while I breathe. She stared at him. The Thornweave hummed like a pulse drum. Then listen, she said. This is not just a coup. They're using forbidden magic. They intend to sever my bond to the weave, to make the land think I'm dead. Aldric's jaw set. Then we move quickly. He stepped closer, his hand hovering, asking permission without words.
She gave the smallest nod. He caught her elbow gently but firmly. Lead me. The air beneath the east wing was colder than the snow outside. Unlit corridors wove like veins beneath the palace, passages used only for storage or rituals of earlier monarchs. Marienne walked with one hand pressed to the wall, feeling the Thornweave tugging her forward. Aldric stayed half a step behind, silent and alert. The further they descended, the heavier the air grew. The walls felt wrong, drained, brittle, as if something had leached the life out of them. They've begun, Marienne whispered. The weave is thinning here. Aldric tightened his grip on her arm. Then do not stray from me. She nodded, breath shallow. Voices drifted from a chamber ahead. Halvian's voice carried clearly. The Queen's bond will snap like a dry twig the moment we activate the siphon. She will collapse, we will mourn, and Thornfell will turn to those who truly understand how to lead. You mean you? Another voice said nervously. Do you doubt your future Lord Regent? Halvian's tone sharpened. No, my lord. Then hold your pung and prepare. Marienne stepped forward, but Aldric caught her wrist. Wait, he breathed. He peered around the corner. In the chamber ahead, 6 nobles stood around a sigil drawn in emerald powder. Halvian held a rod etched with runes, pointed toward a small effigy shaped like the Thorn Crown. Aldric's eyes narrowed. If he activates that, the weave will think you've died. I know, Marienne whispered. We have moments. He released her wrist, but took her hand instead. Stay behind me, he murmured. Aldric. He didn't let her protest. Drawing in a breath, he stepped into the chamber. Halvian looked up. His expression froze. Sir Aldric, he said, voice tightening. How fortunate for you to arrive. I was just thinking how Thornfell might benefit from a consort more cooperative. Aldric's smile was a blade. You know, Halvian, I've been waiting to hit something all day. Thank you for volunteering. Halvian's eyes flicked to the other nobles. Stop him! 3 lunged forward. Aldric moved like a man who had survived too many battlefields to count. He seized the first assailant's wrist, twisted sharply, and used the momentum to send him crashing into the second. The third swung a dagger. Aldric caught his arm with brutal efficiency and slammed him to the ground. Marienne stepped forward, her heart hammering. Halvian, in the name of the crown, stand down. Halvian sneered. You think the crown still holds sway here? You have weakened the weave with your foolish choices. You let an enemy stand at your side. You endangered Thornfell by choosing sentiment over strength. This is not sentiment, Marienne said sharply. It is governance. And what you do is treason. Treason? Halvian laughed. No, Majesty. Treason is letting the weave bond itself to a foreigner, letting it favor him over its own blood. You are not ruling Thornfell, you are losing it. And with that, he plunged the rune-carved rod into the sigil's heart. Green light exploded outward. Marienne screamed as the Thornweave ripped through her, wrenching itself from her chest like a living thing trying to flee.
Her knees buckled. She felt herself falling. But Aldric was already there. He caught her with both arms, pulling her against him as the chamber filled with swirling green wind. "No," he snarled, voice raw. "You don't get to take her." He lowered his head to hers, shielding her with his body. "Marienne," he said fiercely, "stay with me. Look at me." She lifted her gaze, barely able to focus through the pain. The weave was screaming, wild, terrified, seeking an anchor. Aldric pressed his forehead to hers. "I am here," he said. "I choose you. Now choose me." Her breath hitched. The words cut through the chaos like a blade through smoke. The Thornweave seized on them. Green light flared between them, surging through their joined hands, their bodies, their hearts. Their bond, however fragile, however new, was real. And in that moment, it became the weave's lifeline. Marienne inhaled, and the weave snapped back into her, slamming like a tide returning to shore. Halvian screamed as the sigil shattered, emerald powder exploding into harmless dust. The runic rod cracked down the middle, collapsing into his hands. The nobles stumbled back, blinded. Aldric held Marienne upright until the last of the magic quieted. Then she stepped forward, voice shaking but clear. "Seize them," she commanded. Riona burst into the chamber with a squad of guards, drawn by the magical blast. She took in the scene, Halvian trembling, noble stunned, sigil destroyed, and raised her spear. "By order of the Queen," she barked, "you are under arrest for treason." Halvian dropped to his knees, not from penance, but shock. "This isn't possible," he whispered. "The weave should have shattered. She should have—" "The weave," Marienne said quietly. "You wove lies into its roots. Aldric wove loyalty." Halvian stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. "The night," he rasped. "The weave chose him." Marienne looked at Aldric, who stood beside her, steady, bruised, alive, eyes fixed only on her. "No," she said softly, "I chose him. The weave simply recognized what I had already begun." Aldric's breath caught, but he said nothing. Not here, not now. Guards dragged Halvian and the other nobles away. The chamber fell silent, except for Marianne's heartbeat, still sinking with the weave's pulse. Aldric turned to her. "Are you hurt?" "No," she swallowed. "Because of you." He shook his head. "Because we stood together." The Thornweave pulsed, warm and certain. Marianne stepped closer, her voice falling to a whisper only he could hear. "You told me to choose you," she said. "In the moment I thought I was dying." His eyes softened, the fierceness in them giving way to something quieter, deeper. "And did you?" he asked. She reached out, hesitated, then let her fingers brush lightly against his. "Yes," she breathed. His exhale came slow and unsteady. Then he bowed his head, not in subservience, but in something like gratitude, like relief. "Then," Aldric murmured, "whatever comes next, we face it together." The Thornweave hummed its agreement, steady at last. But far beyond the palace walls, in Valacross, King Alvar received Halvian's earlier message and decided the time for letters had ended. War moved like winter thawing into flood, and Thornfell would need every thread of the fragile, fierce bond forged tonight to survive what came next. The snow did not melt quickly. It lay in pale sheets over Thornfell, softening the hard lines of walls and roofs, filling in the scars on the land as if the kingdom itself tried to forget how close it had come to shattering. But the Thornweave remembered. It pulsed beneath the frost like sap under bark, newly steady, yet wary, coiled for what might come next.
Halvavian and his co-conspirators were confined in the deepest cells, their titles stripped, their crests removed from the hall. The court had watched them led away in stunned silence. No one stepped forward to defend them. Marianne felt the absence of their poisonous whispers like the first clear breath after smoke. But she also felt the hollow space their treachery had left. Where there was emptiness, something would try to grow. Loyalty, fear, or ambition. She had to decide which. The weave stayed close now, like a living mantle draped over her shoulders. It no longer snapped at her nerves with every doubt. It watched. It listened. It pressed gently whenever she tried to look away from the hard things. The hardest of all came 3 days after Halvavian's fall. In the war room, a messenger from the northern watchtower knelt, cloak crusted with ice. "Majesty," he said hoarsely, "Valacross gathers. A full host, not a raid. Banners, siege engines, winter tents. They camp beyond the Birch Hollow Ridge." The room chilled, though the hearth burned high. "How many?" Riona asked. "Enough," the messenger said grimly. "More than enough." Marianne's gaze slid to the red lines on the map, to the place where ink marked the ridge that seemed to tug at the threads of her fate again and again. "They march because of me," Aldric said quietly from her right. "No," Marianne said.
"They march because a king cannot see beyond his pride. Your choice was only the excuse he needed." He looked at the map, jaw set. "Excuse or not, it will be my name they shout when they cross the river." The Thornweave pulsed, tasting his guilt. Marianne felt it gather, ready to twist that guilt into panic if she let it. She would not. "What do you propose?" she asked him. He blinked, surprised. "You ask my counsel on this?" "You know Valacross's mind and its king's temper," she said. "You stood against them on our bank. Speak." He leaned over the map, hands braced on the table. "Alvar brings a full host, but not to throw them blindly at your walls," he said. "He wants you to see them, to fear them. He will offer terms that make him seem merciful while tightening his grip." "What terms?" Caroline asked. "Surrender me," Aldric said, simply. "Deliver the traitor bound and kneeling. Swear to keep the Thornweave from Valacross's borders. Promise to never again take one of his as consort. In exchange, he will withdraw, ostensibly in the name of peace." "And if I refuse?" Marianne asked. Aldric's gaze did not flinch. "He will test the strength of your walls and your weave. He may not intend to take the kingdom this season, but he will want to see how loudly you break." The weave rustled under her skin like wind through bare branches. It did not like the shape of this potential future. "Then we must ensure he hears something else," Marianne said. She looked at Corvellan. "Can the Thornweave defend us?" "Yes," the seer said softly, "if you ask it to. It can raise thorns from the earth, twist roots to block wheels, swell rivers to bar crossings. But every act will pull you deeper. You will feel what the land feels. You will risk losing yourself in it." "And if we do nothing?" she pressed. "Then steel will meet steel, and blood will feed soil," Corvellan replied. "The weave does not need your permission for that." Silence settled. The choices gathered around her like spirits, clamoring to be chosen. Aldric broke it. "If you ask the weave to crush Valacross's host," he said, "you will feed every fear their priests preach. They will whisper that your magic is a weapon aimed at their fields, that you twist storms and floods to punish them. The stories will grow until war is no longer about borders, but survival." "So we do nothing?" Riona demanded. "We let them ring our walls and see if they go away?" "No," Aldric said. "We stand where they can see us. We draw them to the place where this started. Birch Hollow." Riona frowned. You want the queen to ride to the border? Yes, Aldric said, with a guard strong enough to show we are not cowed and small enough not to look like we seek battle. Alvar wants an audience with your fear, Majesty. Deny him that. And show him what instead? Saraline asked.
Her resolve, Aldric said, and her control. Use the weave not to crush him, but to prove what it truly is. Marienne's heart thudded. You suggest, she said slowly, that I bring the Thornweave to the border in plain sight of our enemy. Yes, Aldric said. Show him that when you wield it, you hold it back on his side, that you could drown his host and choose not to. Make it clear that if Thornfell wished to wield its magic as a blade, we would not be arguing in snow. Riona eyed him. You think a man like Alvar will be shamed into restraint? I think he is not blind, Aldric said. He cares for Valacross. After his pride, true, but he does care. If he sees that war will hurt his people as much as it hurts yours, he may listen where letters fail. And if he doesn't? Saraline asked. Aldric looked at Marienne. Then I challenge him with the one thing he values more than power, his own legend. The duel, Corvellan murmured, understanding. You would call him to it. It would not be a duel to amuse courtiers, Aldric said. It would be a stand that the weave itself watches. If he refuses and orders slaughter anyway, his own men will see him as a coward who sends them to die while he spurns honorable risk. If he accepts and kills me, he regains his knight, but proves you were willing to stand before his host. If he loses, he will not show his face on our border again, Riona finished quietly. Marienne felt the room tilt slightly, as if the floor had shifted under her boots. You offer your life easily, she said, voice low. Not easily, he answered, but plainly. This began with me. It is fitting that it might end with me as well. The Thornweave pressed in, testing the weight of his words. Marienne closed her eyes. The maps blurred behind her lids, replaced by images she had not asked for. Aldric on the ridge, shield raised. Aldric in the ritual chamber, arms wrapped tight around her as magic raged. Aldric walking the courtyard at night like a man still learning what safety felt like. Every time you speak like this, she murmured, the weave listens, and so do I. I know, he said. She opened her eyes. We go to Birch Hollow, she said. We show King Alvar what Thornfell is. We show him what you have chosen. But I will not offer you up like a lamb for his knife. You may not get that choice, Aldric replied quietly. Once we stand at the river, much will move very fast. Then we had better decide now what we are willing to hold, she said. The weave pulsed, neither urging nor forbidding, waiting. Marienne placed her hand flat on the map, over the ridge that had seen too much blood already. Call the guard, she said. We ride at dawn. Dawn came gray and sharp. The Birch Hollow Road wound north from the capital, cutting through leafless copses and frozen fields. The sky hung low, a lid over a world that had forgotten the color blue. Breath smoked in front of the riders' faces, hooves crunching over hardened ground. Marienne rode at the head of the column, Riona and a hand-picked thorn guard at her back. To her right, Aldric kept pace, his armor plain but well-maintained, Thornfell's green surcoat worn over a breastplate that had once borne Valacross's sigil. The wolf had been scraped away. Only faint scars in the metal showed where it had been. You could have asked for new armor, Marienne said quietly, eyes on the road ahead. And pretend I never served where I did? He replied. No, let them see the mark. Let them see what I put over it. She glanced at the green cloth. The weave hummed at the edge of her awareness, responding to the layers of meaning. Are you afraid? She asked. Yes, he said. Are you? Yes. He nodded, as if that answer balanced something between them. After a moment he added, I am more afraid of failing you than of dying. She felt her throat tighten. Do not say things like that to me when the Weave is listening, Aldric. It would listen anyway, he said. I would rather it hear the truth. The Weave fluttered, warmed, anchored. She drew in a breath of cold air so sharp it almost hurt. When we stand before Alvar, remember that your life is not mine to spend lightly, no matter what you think you owe me. What I owe you is not why I stand there, he said. What I choose is. She found, absurdly, that she wanted to argue with that distinction. She did not. There would be time, if he lived, to untangle all the threads between duty and desire. If he lived. Whatever happens, she said quietly, hear this now. I do not regret choosing you, not as consort, not as ally, not as the man I reach for when the world tries to tear itself apart around me. His fingers tightened on his reins. He looked straight ahead, jaw working. Thank you, he said. For which part? For trusting me with all of that, he said. I have done nothing to deserve it. You have done everything, she answered, and you will have opportunities to do more. I expect a high standard of you, Sir Aldric. He huffed the faintest laugh. I will attempt not to disappoint you. See that you don't, she said, and the cold seemed a little less biting. By the time the ridge came into view, midday had bled into pale afternoon. Birch Hollow rose ahead, its scrub-covered slopes dusted with snow. Beyond the ridge, in the shallow valley that marked the border, Valacross's host boiled, a sea of red and silver banners, tents like upturned bowls, lines of soldiers glinting like teeth. They were not yet in battle formation. They were waiting.
Riona drew up at Marienne's left. We stop here, Majesty. Any closer, and they will read it as provocation. That is precisely what it is, Marienne said. We provoke them into speaking instead of swinging. She nudged her horse forward until she stood at the crest of the ridge, visible to anyone watching from below. Aldric and Riona flanked her. The rest of the guard spread out behind in a bristling line. Across the valley, horns sounded. The Valacross banners shifted. A contingent of riders broke away from the main host, cresting their own side of the border. At their head rode King Alvar Brast. Marienne had never seen him in person. The Weave had shown her a glimpse in her dream. A man bent over maps, shadows under his eyes. Now, distance flattened him into a figure of armor and fur and authority. As the opposing parties drew nearer, stopping with the river between them, details sharpened. Alvar was in his middle years, beard streaked with iron, eyes sharp and restless. He wore no crown, only a helm tucked at his saddle horn, as if he needed nothing more than his presence to claim authority. He reined in at the water's edge, lip curling. "Queen of Thorns," he called. "You ride far from your walls." "And you ride far from your cities," Marienne replied. "Shall we trade lectures on geography, or get to the reason you are here?" A ripple of amusement went through some of the soldiers behind Alvar, quickly stifled. The king's gaze slid to Aldric. His expression hardened. "You stand at her side," Alvar said. "Tell me this is a trick of the snow." Aldric's horse shifted under him. He kept his posture steady, voice clear. "It is no trick, my king," he said. "I stand where I chose to stand." "You took an oath to me," Alvar snarled, the surface politeness cracking. "To Valacross. You were the blade at my hand. And now you let yourself be paraded as a trophy by a woman who twists storms to starve our fields." The Thornweave stirred, pricked by the accusation. Marienne laid a hand flat over her heart, steadying. "The Thornweave has never obeyed my whims," she said. "It barely obeys my requests. But it knows the difference between intention and consequence. Whatever storms crossed your borders were not sent at my command. You expect me to believe that your magic flails blindly, harming where it may?" Alvar demanded. "That is worse, not better. I expect you to see the difference between a hand that wields a blade and a river that overflows," Marienne said. "Both can cut. Only one does it with malice." "Mistake or not, my men have died," he said coldly. "My crops have withered.
And now my most faithful knight stands in the colors of the hand that harmed us." "If I had wished to harm you, Alvar," she said, voice quiet, "I would not have ridden to stand within arrow shot of your host." He snarled again at the familiarity, but the name slipped free too easily. The weave flickered at the edge of his awareness, though he did not sense it. "You demand the return of Sir Aldric," Marienne continued. "I refuse. He is my consort, my ally, and he stood on this ridge and bled for Thornfell." "Traitor!" someone shouted from the Valacross ranks. Aldric's back stiffened, but he did not look away. "I did not betray Valacross," he called. "Valacross betrayed me. It asked me to ride blind, blaming magic for every ill while ignoring its own greed. I have seen Thornfell's land, its people. They are as hungry and tired of war as you are. I will not ride for a king who sees only maps." Alvar's face darkened. "You forget yourself." "No," Aldric said. "For the first time, I remember." The river between them murmured under a skim of ice. Alvar drew a breath through his teeth. "Very well. If words will not return what is mine, steel will." His hand lifted, half toward his sword, half as a signal to his men. The Thornweave surged, sensing the imminent violence. It pressed against Marianne's ribs, demanding outlet, demanding purpose. Marianne's eyes narrowed. "Stop," she said. The word came out not as a queen's command, but as something deeper, resonant. The weave poured through it like water through a gate. Green light shimmered along the ridge at her feet, running like quicksilver through buried roots. The land answered. On Thornfell's side of the river, the ground rose in a low, bristling barrier of thorny vines, tall enough to shield, not high enough to hide an army. On Valacross's bank, the river swelled, ice cracking, water heaving up with sudden strength. Gasps rippled through both hosts. Marienne did not collapse. The weave strained at her, cold and hot all at once. But this time she braced, anchored not only in herself, but in the man at her side. Aldric's presence felt like a grounded stone in the current, a point the magic flowed around and steadied against. "I could drown your vanguard where they sit," Marienne said, her voice carrying eerily clearly. "I could twist these thorns to pierce your saddles. The weave is strong when it defends, but I will not send its strength past that river." The water surged, then stopped. It came up to the very edge of its bank on Valacross's side, and went no further. The thorn barrier on Thornfell's side curved inward, a shield against arrows from across. Alvar stared, hands clenched on his reins. "You show off your power," he said, but the edge of his voice had changed. "You threaten." "I show you what will happen," Marienne said. "To my men and to yours. The Thornweave does not know your borders. If I unleash it in full, it will send storms where it will, floods where it must.
Your people will suffer as much as mine, and neither of us will sleep without blaming the other." Alvar's gaze flicked to the swelling river, to the thorns that had risen like a living wall. "What do you suggest, then?" he asked, each word dragged from him. "That we simply forgive? Forget?" "No," she said. "That we learn. That we accept the weave is not a weapon one side can hold over the other. That we agree. If my magic harms Valacross, I will answer for it. Not with prisoners, but with aid. And if your actions harm Thornfell, you will answer in kind. We acknowledge the storms as shared. We agree to face them together or not at all." He laughed bitterly. "You would have me sign a treaty with a river?" "With the person the river listens to," she said. "You can go on telling your people that Thornfell seeks their ruin. Or you can tell them you stood here today and watched your enemy stay her hand." The weave pressed at her ribs, straining. She could feel its temptation to push the water further, to show more, to make him see with the fear that would carve the lesson into him permanently. She tightened her grip on it, holding it back. Alvar watched that struggle in her eyes. He was not blind. "You gamble," he said softly. "You come to me with your magic half drawn, trusting that I will see your restraint rather than your arrogance." "Yes," she said. "I gamble that you care for your people enough not to throw them into a flood to scratch your pride." "And what of my knight?" he asked. "What of the man who took my oaths and now speaks against me?" Aldric nudged his horse forward until he was a fraction past Marienne's line. "King Alvar," he called, "I offer myself to answer that question." Marienne's breath stopped. "Aldric?" He flicked her a quick look, asking, apologizing, promising, then faced his former king fully. "You see me as stolen," he said, "as if I am an object Thornfell plucked from your grasp. I am not. I am a man who chose to cross a river and stand on the other side. You taught me to ride where I was ordered. You did not teach me what to do when the orders no longer matched what I believed." "You believed you had the right to abandon your king?" Alvar said coldly. "No," Aldric replied. "I believed I had the duty to stand where I could do the most good. I rode beside men who blamed Thornfell's magic for every hailstorm, every failed crop. But when I came here, I saw a land as battered as ours, people just as hungry, a queen who did not wield her power to strike us even when she had cause. I chose her." The weave flared at that. Chose. Alvar's expression twisted.
"You would throw away your homeland for a woman who bewitched you." Marienne drew breath to answer, but Aldric beat her to it. "I throw nothing away," he said. "I carry Valacross with me in every scar, every memory. But I will not serve a king who uses his people's fear as tinder for his ambitions. If you would call that bewitchment, then so be it. I would rather be bewitched into compassion than loyal in ignorance." Murmurs rippled through the Valacross ranks. A few faces shifted, not convinced, but cracked. "He speaks treason," one of Alvar's captains hissed. "He speaks truth," another muttered under his breath, too low for his king, but not for the weave to hear. Alvar's knuckles whitened on his reins. "You would humiliate me before my own host," he said. "You would make me appear weak." "You make yourself so if you strike here," Aldric said. "You know what Thornfell's weave can do now. You have seen it. If you order your men forward, many will die, and not only on their side of the river. And those who live will know you chose your pride over their lives, even when your enemy offered another path." "Another path?" Alvar demanded. "What path?" Aldric drew in a breath. This was the moment the weave had been straining toward, she realized, not the magic, but the vow. "I renounce my oath to you, Alvar Brast," he said, voice ringing out clear as struck steel. "Not out of hatred, but out of belief that you no longer lead where I can follow.
I bind my loyalty instead to Queen Marienne Thornevale and the land she serves. I will defend Thornfell's borders, including this river. I will also refuse to strike at Valacross except in true defense. I will stand where I am now, between what you fear and what you do not understand." Marienne felt the words land in her bones like stones dropped in deep water. The weave seized on them. Green light surged up around Aldric, shimmering like a second surcoat. It did not burn him, it wrapped him, acknowledging, accepting. On both sides of the river, men and women stared, some crossing themselves, some gripping charms. Alvar's eyes blazed, not with the simple rage of a man defied, but with the wounded fury of someone whose world had just shifted under his feet. "You dare," he said, voice low and trembling. "You dare stand there and claim you are still Valacross-born while you spit on my name." "I do not spit," Aldric said. "I simply choose." "Then choose this," Alvar snarled. "Prove your words before the eyes of both kingdoms." His hand flew to his sword. Steel whispered as he drew it free. "I accept your offer of a duel," he said. "You think me afraid? Then face me. If you are the man you claim, you will meet me steel to steel. If you win, I will withdraw my host for this season."
If you fall, your queen buries her traitor and remembers what it costs to steal from kings. The Valacross ranks roared approval. Thornfell's guard bristled, some shouting, some swearing. Marianne's heart lurched. "No," she said, the word ripped from her. "Absolutely not. I did not come here to trade your life for his pride." Aldric turned in his saddle. His eyes were dark, full of something fierce and tender and unshakable. "This is not trading, Marianne," he said softly. "This is claiming. You asked me once not to speak of my life as if it were already spent. Let me show you that I know its weight now." "The weave," she began, "has already woven me into it," he said. "If I die here, it will mourn. If I live, it will remember why." The Thornweave surged, torn between fear and fierce approval. It wanted him safe. It also wanted this vow fulfilled. It pulled at her in two directions at once. "You promised," she whispered, "that you would not spend your life so lightly." "And I keep that promise," he said. "This is not light. It is heavy and deliberate. And it is not only for you. It is for every man on both banks who holds his breath right now, waiting to see whether there is any path other than drowning." Riona leaned close, voice low. "Majesty. If he refuses, Alvar will claim cowardice and press the attack. If he accepts and loses," she swallowed, "we will still have our walls, our magic, and his choice will echo in every hearth where this story is told. Men might remember and hesitate the next time a king calls for war." "And if he wins?" Saraline said from behind. "If he wins, we buy more than a season. We buy the shape of the tale. A knight who turned from conquest to protection. A queen who held back power when she could have struck. Sometimes stories are as strong as walls." Marianne closed her eyes for the space of a breath. "You will not forbid me?" Aldric asked quietly. "I want to," she said, voice shaking. "Every part of me that remembers blood on snow wants to chain you to your horse and ride you home. But you are not mine to order. You are mine to stand beside." She opened her eyes. "And I will stand here, whatever happens." Aldric's mouth softened. "Then we understand one another."
He dismounted, handing his reins to Riona, and stepped forward. "King Alvar," he called, "I accept." They met on the riverbank. No formal field, no polished arena, just a strip of muddy, frozen ground between the swollen water and the bristling thorns. It was fitting. Their whole lives had played out in places like this. Edges, borders, uneasy ground. Alvar shed his cloak, revealing armor etched with Valacross's wolf. Aldric stood in simpler steel, his breastplate scarred, Thornfell's green surcoat hanging torn at one edge from some earlier skirmish. They saluted, neither mocking nor friendly.
The weave hummed like a plucked string. Marienne felt it coil through muscles that were not her own, through the ground under Aldric's boots, through the thin film of ice on the river. "Do not interfere," Corvellan whispered from somewhere behind her, sensing her impulse before she fully formed it. "If you twist the magic now, it will break faith with all who watch. Let his choice stand." "His choice may kill him," she said. "Or save many more," he replied. "That is often the shape of such choices." Steel rang. The duel began. Alvar fought like a man who had grown up with a sword in his hand, brutal, efficient, no wasted motion. He drove forward in powerful, cleaving strikes designed to batter down defense. Aldric met him with a different style, less force, more redirection, letting the blows glance and slide, looking for openings rather than trying to crush. They were well matched. On the first pass, Alvar's strike scraped Aldric's pauldron, jarring his shoulder. On the second, Aldric's blade cut a shallow line across Alvar's forearm. The watching armies murmured, breath frosting the air in ghostly wreaths. Marienne felt each impact like a small shock, the weave reflecting it back to her. She dug her fingers into her horse's mane, knuckles white. "Hold," she whispered, not to either man, but to the weave itself. "Do not twist this. Let it be what it is." The magic listened. Time blurred. The fight narrowed into a series of beats. Step, strike, breath. Alvar pressed, trying to drive Aldric back into the thorn wall. Aldric gave ground only when he had to, moving sideways, keeping the river at his left, the thorns at his right, never letting himself be pinned. At one brutal exchange, Alvar feinted high, then swung low. His blade bit into Aldric's thigh. Blood splashed the snow. Marienne swayed. The weave lunged, wanting to heal, to shield, to warp the ground under Alvar's feet. She held it back with everything she had. "If I steal this from him," she thought wildly, "I steal the meaning." Aldric stumbled, teeth bared in a grimace. Alvar pressed in, sensing advantage. "Yield," the king snarled. "I will make it quick. That is more than you deserve." Aldric's breath came harsh in the cold air. He could not lunge now. His leg would betray him. But his eyes were clear. "I have yielded enough to you," he panted. "No more." He shifted his grip. Not the high guard of a healthy man, but a low, grounded stance that kept his weight off the injured leg. His world narrowed to the arc of Alvar's sword, the rhythm of his shoulders. Marienne felt something click in the weave, like a knot pulling tight. It recognized that stance, that resolve. On the next exchange, Alvar overreached, convinced his opponent was weakening. Aldric pivoted, pain lancing his thigh, and brought his blade up in a sharp, controlled stroke. Steel screeched. Alvar's sword flew from his hand, spinning into the river. Silence crashed. Alvar froze, chest heaving. Aldric stood before him, sword point leveled at the king's throat. They were both bleeding, both exhausted. The weave held its breath along with everyone else. "Do it!" someone shouted from the Thornfell line. "End him! Kill the traitor!" a Valacross soldier screamed. The river gurgled quietly, ice bobbing in eddies.
Aldric's arm tensed. Marienne's heart hammered. If he killed Alvar here, Valacross would howl for blood for a generation. The weave might surge in vicious triumph. War would wear a martyr's face. Aldric looked up, not at Marienne, but beyond her, as if seeing both banks at once. Then he took a step back. "I will not kill you," he said, voice raw but steady. "Not because you do not deserve it, but because too many men die for the wrong reasons already. Let this end be different." He lowered his sword. Gasps rippled. Confusion, outrage, awe. Alvar stared at him as if he had grown a second head. "You had me," the king said, voice hoarse. "You had me. Are you a fool?" "Perhaps," Aldric said. "But if I kill you, the story becomes simple. Evil queen steals faithful knight. Faithful king dies trying to reclaim him. If you live, you must tell a more complicated tale. That your traitor beat you fairly and chose not to spill your blood. That your enemy stayed her magic when she could have drowned you all." He turned his back. The weave shivered at the audacity of it. Turning your back on a man who had tried to kill you was not in any manual of safe conduct. But it was in the unwritten rules of some deeper logic, one that understood what stories did to men's hearts. Marienne felt like her bones were made of glass. She forced her horse forward until she came level with Aldric, Thornwall at her back, River at her front. "King Alvar," she said, "you marched here to reclaim what you believed was yours. You have seen what is now mine instead. A man who will not raise his sword, even when the chance for revenge lies at his feet." She spread her hands, letting the weave glow faintly around her fingertips. It cast no bolt, no blast, just a soft, steady light. "You have also seen what my magic can do and what it will not do. I will not plead with you. I will not beg. I will say this. If you order your men forward now, they will walk into thorns and flood. Many will die. And when they ask why, you will have to answer them, not with myths, but with the memory of this moment." She let the words hang. Alvar stood rigid, breath gusting in thin white plumes. Across his face, emotions warred: fury, humiliation, wounded pride, bone-deep weariness. The weave brushed his edges and recoiled from his anger, but it also tasted the tiredness underneath. At last, he bent to pick up his fallen sword from the river's edge. The blade dripped muddy water as he sheathed it. "We withdraw," he said. The words felt like ripping bark off a tree. His captains gaped. "My king!" "I said we withdraw," Alvar snapped. "Or would you have me ignore the will of our own gods? I lost. I live. That is a judgment of its own." His gaze snapped back to Aldric. "I do not forgive you," he said. "Do not expect that in this life or any other." "I don't," Aldric replied quietly. "Your forgiveness is not what I rode for. But I will not waste my men to salve my pride today. Enjoy your season of peace, Queen of Thorns. Next time the storms come, we will see whether your restraint holds as firm." "Next time the storms come," Marienne said, "send a messenger instead of an army. We will meet them together." He snorted, but did not answer. He wheeled his horse, signaling the withdrawal. Slowly, the Valacross host turned. Banners shifted, siege engines creaked, boots tramped. The great red and silver mass began to dissolve into retreat. On the Thornfell side, a ragged cheer rose, disbelieving, then growing. Marienne let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding for days. The weave eased, settling like a cloak across her shoulders rather than a storm cloud. Her thigh went weak. Except it wasn't her thigh. It was Aldric's. She turned. He was still standing, sword in hand, but now that the strain had released, his wound asserted itself. Blood soaked his trouser leg, dark against the snow. "Sit," she ordered. "I'm fine," he began. She glared. The Thornweave, unhelpfully, prodded his injury to underline her point. He winced. "Perhaps a bit less fine than I thought." Riona was already moving, shouting for a stretcher. Corvellan approached, staff glowing faintly. "Majesty," the seer murmured, "you could knit the flesh. It would seal quicker under your hand." "I know," she said, "but I will not do it here, in front of both armies. They have seen enough magic for one day. Let them remember his sword, not my weave." Corvellan nodded, approving. Aldric let Riona take his sword and half of his weight as he limped back toward the Thornfell line. Marienne dismounted and walked beside him, each step sinking slightly in the snow. "You risked a great deal," she said quietly. "So did you," he replied. "We seem to be in the habit." "You did not kill him." "No," he said. "Someone in this story had to stop the cycle." She studied his profile. "You speak as if you sat down and wrote the ending beforehand." "I didn't," he said. "But I knew the shape I wanted. I did not want to haunt your halls as the man who gave Valacross a martyr." "And if he had killed you?" she whispered.
"Then I hope," he said, "that the men who watched would remember the man who chose not to strike when he could, and perhaps, on some future day, that memory would make one of them lower his own blade." The weave pulsed, warmed by the thought. "You think in long shadows," she said. "You have that effect on me," he replied. Back in Thornfell, the news spread faster than any wind. The king of Valacross had ridden home with his army intact. The Queen of Thorns had stood on a ridge and held back her magic, and the enemy knight she had chosen for her consort had faced his former king in duel, won, and spared his life. Some told it as a tale of astonishing mercy, some as foolish risk. All told it. Marienne presided over Halvian's judgment a week later, seated on the throne crown resting lightly on her brow. The traitorous lord was brought before her in chains, no longer in fine silks, but plain gray wool. He still carried himself with a certain stiff dignity, but the arrogant gleam had dimmed. "You conspired with Valacross," Marienne said. "You attempted to sever my bond with the Thornweave. You nearly tore the land itself apart, and all because you believed you knew better than your queen how to wield it." Halvian lifted his chin. "I believed you weak. Your choice of consort confirmed it." "Then you misread both me and the man you tried to use," she said. "He stood against his king without breaking his own honor. You sold your kingdom's safety for the promise of advantage." A murmur of agreement ran through the hall. "The penalty for high treason is death," Saraline announced. Halvian did not flinch. "Then kill me, Majesty," he said. "I have no interest in rotting." Marienne looked at him, really looked, at the lines of bitterness, at the restless, calculating eyes that had been turned inward since his arrest, and at the faint flicker of something like regret buried under layers of resentment. The weave brushed his edges, tasted the sour tangle of his intentions. It did not want him near its roots again, but it did not hunger for his blood either. "No," she said. A ripple of surprise went through the hall. "You will not kill me?" Halvian asked, genuinely taken aback. "You wanted to shape Thornfell," she said. "You will, just not as you imagined." She rose. "You are stripped of your title and lands," she said. "Your name will be removed from the house rolls. You will be confined for the rest of your days to the monastery at Grafen, where no Thornweave roots reach. You will spend your time copying the histories of this kingdom by hand. Every war, every drought, every act of mercy, and every act of folly. You will write the names of every farmer who died because someone at court thought a game worth playing." Halvian stared at her, color draining from his face.
That is a long punishment, he said.
Yes, she said, and a useful one. He swallowed. You are crueler than your father, he muttered. No, she replied, just clearer. The weave pulsed in quiet approval. As guards led Halvian away, Marienne felt some tight part of her ease. She had not simply removed a threat. She had redirected it into something that might, in time, prevent others. After the hall dispersed, she found Aldric in the gardens again. Winter still held the land, but the roses had begun, improbably, to show green at the tips of their canes, as if spring had forgotten the calendar. Snow clung to the branches like lace. Aldric leaned on a cane, his thigh wound neatly bandaged beneath his trousers. He hated the cane. She could see it in the way his fingers gripped it like an enemy. But he used it, which showed he was capable of learning. You should be resting, she said. I am, he replied. Horizontally resting grows dull. She walked to his side, hands tucked into her sleeves against the chill. How is the leg? She asked. Healing, he said. The weave's nudge helped. He glanced at her. Thank you. She had gone to his chamber that first night back from the border, hand resting on his skin as she coaxed the weave to knit bone and muscle just enough to speed the process. Not enough to erase the scar. Scars mattered. They told stories. She wanted this one to speak. You risked pulling too much, he continued. You shouldn't have done it so soon after the border. I did it because I chose to, she said. As you keep reminding me, I am allowed to choose. He smiled faintly. So, you are. They stood in silence for a while, watching their breath twine in the chilly air. Valicross has pulled back, she said. Our scouts confirm it. No signs of immediate regrouping. For now, he said. Alvar is many things. Predictable is not one. No, she agreed. But we bought time, and something else. He looked at her, curious. What? A story that doesn't end with a field full of bodies, she said. A tale of restraint instead of revenge. Of choices that didn't come with a tally of widows right away. He tilted his head, considering. You think that will last? Stories always last longer than battles, she said. How they are told may change, but a man who watched from the back of that host will talk about what happened on that riverbank for the rest of his life. So will the boy in the village who hears it secondhand. That shapes how they think when the next war cry comes. You speak in long shadows, too, he said quietly. You have that effect on me, she replied. He laughed under his breath. Marienne, he said after a moment, voice lower. When I stood there with my sword at Alvar's throat, I thought of you. Not in some noble way. Not of kingdoms or treaties. I thought, very selfishly, of how much it would hurt you to see me become the kind of man who killed a helpless enemy in front of both our peoples. She swallowed. I would not have called him helpless, she said. But no, I would not have wanted to see that. I have killed men before, Aldric said. On raids, on fields, some in fair fights, some not. It sat in me like a weight I learned to ignore. But when I came here, when I watched you bend your magic back from the edge again and again, I realized I did not want to ignore it anymore. His hand tightened on the cane. I wanted to be a man who could lay his blade down and still be called strong. You were strong, she said, terrifyingly so. To turn your back on him, Aldric, my heart nearly stopped. I trusted you to chase him off with thorns and rivers if he tried anything foolish, he said lightly. The weave hummed, smug. She gave it a mental nudge. Do not get ideas, she murmured to it under her breath. I am not your attack dog. Pardon? Aldric asked. Nothing, she said. The magic is sulking. It thinks it did not get to show off enough. He chuckled, then grew serious again. Marienne, he said, when I made that vow at the river, I bound myself to Thornfell, to you. It was not only for show. I meant every word. I do not have a land bond like yours.
but the weave wove itself around my intent. I feel it. It's there at the edge of me now. I know, she said softly. It made itself very obvious. His gaze searched hers. Does that frighten you? What? That the living magic under my feet has developed an opinion about the man I spend my time with? She asked dryly. Constantly. He laughed again. The sound warmed the cold air. I do not know what we are, you and I, he said after a moment. Beyond titles, beyond queen and consort, we began as enemies, then an arrangement, then allies. I have found myself hoping we might be more. Her chest felt tight and fragile, as if the next words might either shatter or strengthen it. The weave wants to know the answer to that, too, she murmured. What do you want? He asked. She turned to face him fully, snow crunching under her boots. I want a consort who argues with me when I am wrong, and stands beside me when I am right, who thinks of the boy hearing the story in some distant village as much as the general standing on a ridge. I want a partner I can trust, not to strike when my back is turned, to catch me when I fall, not because the weave demands it, but because his heart does. She swallowed, her voice softening. And when the day's work is done, I want someone who can sit in silence with me, and be tired and glad to be alive. A slow smile spread across his face, not triumphant, but full of quiet wonder. I can be those things, he said.
You already are, she replied. The question is, can I let myself name it? She stepped closer, so close that the faint green shimmer of the weave rose between them like breath. Aldric, she said, I chose you first as a political gambit, then as an ally. I would like, if you are willing, to choose you now as a man, not because of what you can do for Thornfell, but because of who you have shown yourself to be. He exhaled slowly. I am very willing. Something inside her unclenched, like a knot loosening. Good, she said. Then we will be very busy. There is a kingdom to heal and a peace to tend like a fragile seed. He shifted his weight, carefully because of his leg, and reached, slow enough to let her refuse. She didn't. His fingers closed gently around hers. The touch was warm, solid. The weave surged, not in a wild rush this time, but in a deep, steady swell, like a tide coming in exactly as it should. Around them, the winter roses quivered. A few brave buds pushed through frost, tiny specks of color in a world still mostly gray. Marianne looked down at their joined hands, then up at his face. Will you stay? She asked. Not as a hostage, not as a guest, as the man who stands at my side when this crown is too heavy and the weave is too loud. There is nowhere else I would rather stand, Aldric said simply. Good, she said again, because anything else would have broken her voice. He lifted their joined hands slightly, as if to test the weight of this new thing between them. May I, he began, then stopped, laughter escaping. You are queen. Asking you for permission feels ridiculous. Try, she said, lips curving. May I kiss you? He asked. The words were soft, but they threaded through the weave like a prayer. She felt her cheeks warm. Yes, she said. You may. He stepped closer, careful of his leg, and bent his head. The kiss was not urgent or possessive. It was a question, a promise, a homecoming. His lips were warm against hers, the touch gentle but sure. The weave flared in approval, green light brushing the edges of her vision like the first leaves of spring. When they drew apart, the world felt slightly different, not because it had changed, but because she had. You taste like snow, he said softly. You taste like spiced tea, she replied, and then laughed at the absurdity of saying such a thing in the middle of a magic-touched garden, with guards probably pretending not to watch from a polite distance. He laughed too, the sound easing something heavy between them.
"Come," she said, glancing toward the palace. "There is still work to do. Treaties to draft, patrols to reassign, a seer to scold for being infuriatingly vague. And a queen," he said, squeezing her hand, "to remind to eat." "Yes," she admitted.
"That, too." They walked back toward the palace together, hands still linked. The Thornweave settled around them, content. It had tested them with storms and steel and the pull of old oaths. They had bent, but not broken. Their bond had formed not from spell or duty alone, but from choices made in cold halls, on bloody ridges, in moments when no one watched. Far away, in Valacross, King Alvar sat alone with his maps and his restless anger, thinking of a riverbank and a sword that had not fallen. His people would tell that story too, in their own way. Perhaps, one day, it would soften edges there as well. For now, Thornfell breathed. Snow still lay on the ground. Wars had not vanished from the world. But in a palace where roses bloomed out of season and a queen's crown hummed with living magic, two people had chosen each other, and chosen together to wield their power not as a blade, but as a shield. It would not be easy. But Marianne of Thorns had never asked for easy. She had asked for truth, for loyalty, for a hand that would catch her when she fell. And as Aldric walked beside her, the weave humming in quiet harmony with their hearts, she knew she had found it.